Chapter 27. For a moment, Yang Hai was grinning from ear to ear. He knew that it was because he had gone to the capital, met Wang Lin, and gave him a gift. But wasn't that what the young master was thinking? Compared to other young people, the sixth young master's calmness was definitely rare. Compared to Yang Hai, who was standing there laughing foolishly, the maid Xiao Yin's expression became very ugly. Especially when some of the matchmakers who had come to play matchmaker saw Xiao Yin ask the sixth young master if he had any intention of marrying a wife, her face turned red with anger. If not for her face and not wanting to dampen everyone's spirits on this joyous day, she would have chased them away. At the moment, the Yang family's old residence was very lively, but as the person involved, Yang Chendong, Tiger's Mane, Beta Persei, and the other servants had already gone to the Yamen of Jianing Prefecture to pay a visit to the prefect, Li Daotong. Li Daotong was a jinshi at the end of the Yongle period of Qingzhou. After a lot of hard work, he was appointed as the prefect of Jianing Prefecture, a fourth-rank official. It was equivalent to the secretary of the municipal committee and the mayor of a modern city. When Li Daotong received the news that Yang Chendong had suddenly sent an invitation to visit, he immediately put down the brush he was writing on and said to the housekeeper, "Please." In the entire Jianing Prefecture, the number of people who could receive Li Daotong's please could be counted on 2 hands. But when it came to people younger than 30 years old, there was no doubt that only Yang Chendong had such qualifications. In the guest room, Li Daotong was sitting precariously. Not long after, Yang Chendong, dressed in a green robe, walked in. When he entered the hall and saw Li Daotong, he quickly bowed and said, "Subordinate Yang Chendong greets Lord Li. Ha, Prefect Yang, please rise." Li Daotong narrowed his eyes and stood up, reaching out his hand to support Yang Chendong. Yang Chendong smiled and used this force to straighten his body. No matter what, now that he was in Jianing Mansion, there were too many things he needed the other party to take care of. He had to give the other party enough face. Li Daotong was confident in his status. Being able to help a 9th-rank official up was already giving him enough face. Speaking of which, it was nothing more than a case of a man flattering a man. Magistrate Li also knew that Yang Chendong had an official position at such a young age, so his future would be bright. Now he was being courteous to him, but it was just to get some good karma in the future. Yang Chendong, who was given a seat, declined with a smile. Then, he sat down on a chair and began to talk about his own affairs. "Lord Li, this lowly official's mother has just passed away for more than a year. Her mourning period is not over yet. Please understand." I understand. Your mother was a woman with a title of nobility. Her passing on to the West, this official is also very sad. Governor Yang's filial piety is a matter of course, so there's nothing to worry about. How could Li Daotong not see that this so-called position of governor was originally a non-official position? If he could not understand his superior's intentions and ordered him to start working now, he would be criticized by others. Yang Rong was one of the imperial court's auxiliary ministers. There were countless disciples and former officials. As one of the nobility, Li Daotong should take care of his family. Yang Chendong did this for this reason. He did not want to get involved in some tedious matters. He had been watching the development of the Ming dynasty coldly. At present, he did not want to get involved, so how could he have the intention to serve? Therefore, this trip was to express his modesty and respect. The first thing he did after becoming an official was to pay a visit to his superior. If others knew about this, they would only say that he was sensible and knew the rules. Secondly, he would give up all his functions and go home to be an independent person. It was the most important thing to prepare for his big event. It would not be a waste of time. Now that he had obtained Yang Chendong's approval, Yang Chendong was happy and naturally wanted to express something. He immediately took out a set of L'Oreal women's cosmetics and placed it on the table. He did not know why such women's products would appear in the warehouse. Perhaps it was to serve the families of some officers. However, since he had discovered it, he naturally wanted to use it to the best of his ability. Li Daotong's eyes lit up when he saw the set of exquisite white boxes in front of him. As the local magistrate, he knew that Yang Chendong's item would not be simple. He asked excitedly, "Magistrate Yang, may I know what this is?" Replying to official Li, "This item is called cosmetics. When used on a woman's body, it has the effect of preserving her youth. In the past, I had people send 2 sets to the current emperor. This is the 3rd set." Yang Chendong smiled as he explained the use and origin of this item. Li Daotong immediately became excited when he heard that this was the 3rd set in addition to the emperor's 2 sets. Coincidentally, Magistrate Li attached great importance to relationships, especially to his wife who had gone through hardships with him. It was a pity that she was getting older, so it was inevitable that her beauty would be greatly reduced. With this set of products, it could not be said to solve the real problem, but it could be said to be a testimony of one's heart. When he thought about how no one other than the emperor had used this item, he felt even more grateful. In his excitement and happiness, Li Daotong changed the way he addressed him. "Chendong, I've troubled you. Why don't we have lunch here?" How could he refuse a superior's invitation? Yang Chendong smiled and nodded in agreement. At the same time, he motioned to Tiger's mane, who was standing to the side. Immediately, he placed some MSG, cooking wine, and other things that could not be bought with money on the table. Li Daotong had eaten at the Four Seas restaurant before. With his status, when he asked why the food was so delicious, Yang Fu naturally did not hide it. Therefore, he knew the effects of this item, but it was not good to directly ask the Yang family for it. Now that Yang Chendong had taken the initiative to take out these things, he felt that the other party was too good at dealing with people. He was not inferior to his father at all. For a moment, Li Daotong could not help but become cautious and even nervous when he spoke, as if he was afraid of saying something wrong. On the other hand, Yang Chendong smiled when he should and spoke when he should. He did not seem to be reserved at all. As the saying goes, when one is courteous to others, one must have a request. When one person asked for another person's help, it was inevitable that they would be in a disadvantageous position first. Naturally, they would not be able to speak even if they wanted to. However, Yang Chendong did not want to take advantage of Li Daotong's interest. Even if he did not come today with the name of Ding Yu at home, no one could do anything about it. Since he was so calm, it was natural when they got along, and he even had the intention of gaining the upper hand. This scene was seen by Tiger's mane, Beta Persei, and the others who were standing at the side. Everyone was amazed. They admired the 6th young master's calmness and nonchalance. Yang Chendong had an official position, and since then, he acted more freely. The people of the Yang family's old mansion also felt proud of him. When they walked out on the street, their chests were raised a little. From Magistrate Li's mansion to the Yang family's old mansion, Yang Chendong continued to keep a low profile. Even when guests came, he recommended them on the grounds that he was not feeling well. However, only the old butler Yang Hai, Xiao Yin, and a few other people who were familiar with him knew that the 6th young master was not in the old mansion at all, but had left. As for where he went, they would never ask. In their eyes, the 6th young master was a person who did great things. Everything he did was not something they could explain. At the Black Wharf by the Sea of Fuzhou, Yang Chendong had not appeared here for more than half a year since the last time he left. As soon as he appeared this time, he felt that someone was spying on him from 10 miles away. Then, as expected, someone came out from the dark. There were even 2 people hiding by the sand, using the camouflage there. Even if they were 5 steps away, it would be difficult to discover them. "Hello, young master." There were a total of 8 soldiers in charge of security, and 3 of them were members of the Cold Front that he had personally trained. Yes, you have to be vigilant at all times. You have to know that once the enemy appears, they will never notify you in advance. Yang Chendong smiled and nodded. He knew that under normal circumstances, there were 10 guards in a squad. Only 8 people appeared here, which meant that there were 2 people hiding in the dark and did not take the initiative to come out to greet him. Logically speaking, being able to meet the 6th young master was an opportunity to show their faces, but they would rather give up such an opportunity and still carry out the task of being on guard. This alone was enough to make Yang Chendong feel gratified. Each of you will be rewarded with 5 taels of silver, and the other 2 brothers will be rewarded with 10 taels of silver each. Generous rewards and fair punishments were always an important way to capture people's hearts. Now that Yang Chendong was not short of money, he naturally did not hesitate to spend it. "Thank you, young master." Thump, thump, thump. The 8 guards were all delighted. This was a reward from the 6th young master, and it was enough for them to brag for a while. "Well, this is what you deserve. Continue with your mission." Yang Chendong waved his hand and smiled as he led Tiger's Mane, Beta Persei, and Yang Si to the Black Wharf. Yang San stayed in Jianing Prefecture to set up the security bureau, while Yang Wu and Yang Lu were responsible for the safety of the Yang family. Under the division of labor, Yang Chendong only appeared a few hundred miles away with the 3 of them. But even so, if anyone had any ideas about the 6th young master, they would be making a big mistake. With the large warehouse and advanced weapons in hand, no matter how many people came, they would not be able to do anything to them. It was not an exaggeration to describe the Black Wharf as the speed of Shenzhen's reform and opening up 8 years ago. It had only been half a year, but several factories had already been built. Among them was the arsenal. At present, they could only make bows and crossbows, but with Gao Xiong's continuous supply of iron and copper from the sea. With no shortage of resources, innovation was only a matter of time. The person in charge, Wu Gang, was one of the old people. Cement factory. With a lot of knowledge provided by Yang Chendong, the first batch of cement had already appeared and passed the inspection. Now, more students were being trained to ensure that once a new base was established, a large number of people who knew about cement could immediately use it. The person in charge of this was a person called Jing Guang, who was originally recruited by the old butler, Yang Hai, when he went to the Ministry of Works in the capital. Yang Rong was the Minister of Works for a long time, so he still had the ability to hire a few idle people in the ministry. Chapter 28. Furniture Factory. Its main purpose was to build some furniture and the layout of the soldier training factory. Things like sofas, work tables, and even the construction of carriages were all within its scope. Right now, there was no rubber or suitable materials to make tires. Otherwise, Yang Chendong would have wanted to make some new carriages. To be honest, every time he came to the Black Dock, it was bad luck. The bumpiness was really unbearable. For this reason, Yang Chendong even had the idea of taking out a military vehicle from the warehouse. However, he felt that it was still too shocking and had to suppress this idea. However, he had already decided that this time, when he came to the Black Dock, he would arrange for Gao Xiong to send people to the west to search for rubber trees, especially in the American region. Then he would bring back the whole tree. One day, he would be the first person to make soft tires. The furniture factory was more complicated. The person in charge was also the old craftsman, Li Xuanfu. This person was very meticulous and made Yang Chendong feel more at ease. Power plant. Just by hearing the name, one would know its purpose. However, at that time, no one could understand. Even the person in charge, Luan Qi, was very puzzled. Luan Qi was a craftsman from the Ministry of Works. It was said that he was very smart. When he was very young, he knew how to make many novel and strange things. However, because he was born as a craftsman, his life was naturally not rich. He found a wife, Zhou Hua, who was very good at giving birth. She actually gave birth to 7 children in a few years, living up to his name. With more mouths to feed, Luan Qi naturally could not take care of everything. It was at this time that Yang Hai went to the Ministry of Works and found out about Luan Qi's situation. He remembered that the 6th young master had once said that as long as someone was capable, he would not lack money and food. As such, he brought him over. In order to have enough to eat, Luan Qi brought his wife and children from the capital to Fujian. However, before they reached Jianing, they were picked up by people from Lungfeng. When they arrived, not only did Luan Qi become a research worker, but his wife, Zhou Hua, also showed enough ability. She was very skillful with her hands. The clothes she made were good, fast, and neat. However, this was not the main point. Luan Qi obtained a book on the principles of sewing machine manufacturing written by the 6th young master. It was written on a method to use machine to sew clothes. The main components of the machine base, the needle, the shuttle, and the oil bottle could be made one by one. One could imagine that if it was successful, it would greatly increase the speed of making clothes. It was definitely a great undertaking. When Zhou Hua heard the news, she urged her husband to build such a machine every day. As a skilled embroidery worker, she was too aware of their fate. Many people's eyes were damaged when they were young, so they were useless when they were old. When they arrived at the illegal docks, their meals and drinks were naturally arranged. Yuan Qi was very happy to be able to enter a special research area. Especially when he heard that the sewing machine manufacturing principles were written by the sixth young master himself, he admired it even more. It was difficult to call him, who was originally in a state of research. Not to mention thunder, even if it was a knife, he would not be distracted at all. This was the spirit that a research worker should have. But this time, when he heard someone outside shouting that the young Master Qi was here, he put down all the work in his hands and ran out. Like Yuan Qi, all the people at the illegal docks were also like him. Some of them came first and some came later. But no matter what, they did not have to worry about food and drink now. All of this was brought to them by the sixth young master. They knew how to be grateful. Spontaneously coming out to greet him was a show of their attitude. When Yuan Qi came out of his research room, he saw that Yang Chendong was already surrounded by a group of people. Many of these people had never seen the sixth young master before, but they had been hearing legends about this young master ever since they came here. In their imagination, this person must be tall and powerful, and it was even possible that he had 3 heads and 6 arms. When they surrounded him, it was more of a novelty. However, with so many people suddenly surrounding him, it was difficult to guarantee his safety. Not only Tiger's Mane, Beta Persei, Yang Si, but even Leng Song and Gao Xiong rushed over with the members of the Cold Front to maintain order. In response, Yang Chendong waved his hand and refused. These people trusted him so much, but they could not trust him completely. Who else in the world could be trusted? It's okay. Let them come over and take a look. I also want to talk to them. Yang Chendong acted as if nothing would happen. He picked up a cute little girl who was dressed neatly and had bright eyes. He took out a piece of chewing gum and handed it to her. Big brother, how do you eat this? Do you put it in your mouth? The little girl did not seem to be very afraid of people. She was still smiling when Yang Chendong carried her in his arms. Yes, this thing is called chewing gum. It can keep your breath fresh. You have to put it in your mouth, but you can only chew it. Once it becomes tasteless, you have to spit it out. You can't eat it. Oh, by the way, it can also blow bubbles. As Yang Chendong spoke, he put the same piece of chewing gum in his mouth and began to chew it. Little girl, what's your name? Seeing Yang Chendong take the lead and put the chewing gum in his mouth, the little girl was no longer afraid. She also opened the packaging of the gum in her hand and chewed it. As she ate, she said with a smile, "It's so sweet. Big brother, my name is Xiaoyu. My parents said that on the day I was born, it was drizzling for a whole day." Xiaoyu, what a good name. When he said this, Yang Chendong slowly blew a white bubble in his mouth. Seeing this scene that she had never seen before, Xiaoyu was shocked. Her big eyes were filled with a why. Look. Fortunately, she was smart enough and quickly began to learn how to blow bubbles. However, this kind of thing requires skill. It is not something that can be learned by a first-timer. In addition, chewing gum is not like bubble gum. There is a certain degree of difficulty in blowing bubbles. It is even more impossible to learn immediately. After Yang Chendong ate a piece of candy, white bubbles came out of his mouth, causing the other children to be surprised and envious. Some of the bolder children also tried to reach out to Yang Chendong, wanting a piece of candy that could blow bubbles. Yang Chendong, who had prepared a lot, naturally did not refuse. With the mentality of not worrying about scarcity, but worrying about uneven distribution, he gave a piece to all the children who came to ask for it. The children were happy, but some of the adults were panicking, especially Xiaoyu's mother. She walked over in a panic, bowed, and then said with an apologetic face, "Sixth young master, Xiaoyu is not sensible and asked for things from you. Please forgive her." Looking at the somewhat beautiful middle-aged woman who was neatly dressed, Yang Chendong's face was filled with kindness. You are Xiao Yu's mother? This time, without waiting for the woman to answer, Gao Xiong introduced her first, reporting to young master, this woman is Xiao Yu's mother. Her name is Zhou Hua, and she is the wife of the person in charge of the power plant, Lan Qi. At the same time, she is very skillful. We were just about to report to you and ask you to approve her as the manager of the garment factory. Lan Qi? I've heard of this person. Yang Chendong nodded. Long before he came, he had read some information about the illegal docks. Lan Qi was a person with ideas, strong skills, and was regarded as the smartest person. Naturally, his name had long been in his mind. Zhou Hua was originally a little helpless, afraid that her little daughter would do something wrong and offend the sixth young master. Now that she heard that he already knew her husband's name, she immediately felt honored and her expression became much better. Okay, I'll leave the child to you. Tell your husband that I want to have a good chat with him later. Yang Chendong said politely, and at the same time, he handed Xiao Yu, who was leaning on his arms, back to Zhou Hua. He had always valued talents. If possible, he did not mind telling Lan Qi what he knew, hoping that he could really create electricity. In that case, countless people would benefit from it, and it would also greatly promote the development of science. Zhou Hua had always been a carefree person. Even in the face of strangers, she would not feel afraid. However, she did not know why, but when facing the amiable Yang Chendong, she sweated all over. That was a manifestation of nervousness. Perhaps this was a kind of attitude and respect towards people who were important. The children received the chewing gum and ran away with smiles. Some adults also saw Yang Chendong's true appearance and left with satisfaction. With fewer people around, Yang Chendong walked towards the military camp in the distance, accompanied by Leng Song and Gao Xiong. According to Yang Chendong's idea, the military camp was built very neatly. It was a straight line, giving off a very orderly feeling. Yang Chendong watched the training of the Leng Feng soldiers here. Over the past half a year, the older Leng Feng soldiers had already taken in disciples. Mixing the old and the new was indeed an effective way to increase their combat strength. In addition, after Gao Xiong obtained the new cannons, every time he went out to sea, he would come back victorious. Not only did he bring back unlimited wealth, he also brought back a lot of strong laborers. Among them, there were some good seedlings. After a strict selection process, they became auxiliary soldiers. The so-called auxiliary soldiers were a battle sequence given by Yang Chendong. He also called these people the reserve soldiers. It referred to those soldiers who were undergoing training but had not passed the various tests. In the future, once an auxiliary soldier passed the test and reached the standard, he would immediately become a new Leng Feng soldier. The direct benefit was that his monthly salary would increase. The 1 silver tael per month when he was an auxiliary soldier would become 2 silver taels. Of course, this was not the most important thing. After becoming a Leng Feng soldier, it meant that he was a qualified soldier and would be given a 81 rifle. That was the symbol of glory. For the sake of safety, they usually did not carry bullets in their guns. They would only carry bullets when they were shooting targets or when they needed to go out on missions. However, this still made some people wild with joy. Every new member of Cold Front carried a gun and walked around the dark dock. It was not only to show off, but also to show off. Chapter 29. Leng Song and Gao Xiong didn't stop them. In their eyes, this was an honorable display of status and also a way to increase their sense of responsibility. These people's showing off could indeed boost the morale of the training and ensure that more qualified men would sign up for the army. However, Leng Feng's assessment was too strict. After half a year, the number of auxiliary soldiers had already reached more than 1,000, but only about 100 of them were qualified to carry guns. Yang Chendong stood there in high spirits as he listened to Leng Song and Gao Xiong's report. Especially Leng Song, because most of the candidates were plundered from the sea. He wanted to develop the army, but every time he wanted a good seedling, he had to argue with Gao Xiong many times before he could get his wish. As a result, the army only had a platoon of 30 people. This was far from enough to meet his requirements, and he couldn't lead these people to achieve any glorious results. Yang Chendong lightly shook his head at Lung Song's anxiousness. You can't eat a fat man in one bite. These people were born poor. They didn't even have enough to eat before, so their physical strength couldn't keep up. If they wanted to reach the standard during training, it would naturally take a lot of effort. It doesn't matter if they don't have to, now that they can eat their fill, their physical fitness will definitely improve slowly. When the time comes, more and more people will pass the assessment, and both the Navy and Army will have the opportunity to grow stronger. Haste makes waste. It was unrealistic to expect a person who hadn't eaten their fill for more than a decade to completely recover their body in a short period of time. Yang Chendong had just finished speaking when one of the instructors, He Yang, agreed. Yes, young master is right. These soldiers' physical fitness is really too weak, and it will take some time for them to recover their bodies. We will pay more attention to the distribution of food in the future, so that they can recover as soon as possible and pass the assessment. He Yang observed Yang Chendong attentively and noticed that Yang Chendong was listening attentively. He even nodded from time to time to express his agreement. He then probed, it's just that their bodies are easy to recover with enough food and meat. However, when it comes to cultural classes, most of them are illiterate. It's a little troublesome to teach them. Can't you be a little more lenient in this aspect? Have you already done that? Yang Chendong, who still had a smile on his face, suddenly turned cold. There was a 180-degree change in his expression as he stared fiercely at He Yang. This glance made the courageous He Yang fall to his knees with a thud. At this moment he was already sweating profusely. He felt as if he was being stared at by a ferocious tiger. It was very likely that he would be swallowed whole in the next second. No. To repay the young master, this is just an idea that we instructors have. We haven't implemented it yet. He Yang explained in a weak voice. In just a short while, his clothes were soaked in sweat. It's best if you don't. Let me tell you, you can't relax during cultural classes. There were other trainings and assessments that could not be relaxed either. Remember, they will have to go to the battlefield in the end. They will be risking their lives. If they are not strong enough, sending them to the battlefield is equivalent to sending them to their deaths. When I was training you in the past, the young master said that you should sweat more when you train and bleed less when you fight. I hope that this is not just a slogan, but something that you can completely remember in your hearts. If anyone can't do this, then leave as soon as possible. I don't keep idle people here. Yang Chendong was really a little angry. There were only so many people, yet there were already people who ignored his words. The direct result of this was that the morale of the army would be slackened, and even internal strife would be possible. Soldiers were originally hot-blooded and liked to do things straightforwardly. It was difficult for them to consider the feelings of others. This kind of army was of course a fierce army, but it was also a double-edged sword. If it was not used well, it was afraid that one day it would hurt oneself. This was something that Yang Chendong absolutely did not want to see. They had enough firearms. Once the muzzles were pointed at him, what kind of consequences would there be? Even if he had a bulletproof vest, he would not be able to withstand it. At this moment, or rather, after this incident, Yang Chendong suddenly had an idea in his mind. That was, he had to create a group of sufficiently obedient political instructors, which were the necessary company-level instructors, battalion-level instructors, and regiment-level political commissars. This was not because he wanted to divide power, but because he had to ensure the obedience of the army. Otherwise, even if there were no problems now, there would be a day when it would explode. Then, it would really be a fatal existence. Yang Chendong did not want to come to the great Ming dynasty only to be killed by his own people in the end. That would be a grievance that could not be redressed. Yang Chendong's angry rebuke made He Yang nod his head repeatedly. Even Lung Song and Gao Xiong on the side were sweating. Before this, they did have the idea of lowering the cultural assessment. In the end, it was because of the lack of soldiers and the lack of knowledge. There were always some seedlings who were physically qualified, but because they were unwilling to learn, they did not pass the assessment in the end. If this was only an example, it would be fine. However, it had gradually become a trend, and the fresh blood in the cold front was getting fewer and fewer. In view of this situation, Lung Song and Gao Xiong discussed with He Yang and the other 4 instructors whether they could lower the standards of the cultural assessment. This way, they would be able to obtain more soldiers. In fact, Lung Song and Gao Xiong did not pay enough attention to the importance of the cultural assessment. They even thought that, during war, as long as one had enough military training and had such advanced weapons, one would definitely be able to win the battle. It was enough to know how to read. What was the use of learning so deeply? It was precisely because of this understanding that He Yang and the other 4 instructors had changed their minds. Just now, they were just testing the waters. They never thought that it would cause the 6th young master to be so angry. This was something they did not expect. He even said that this was not a place for idlers. After seeing the advanced weapons, especially the various skills taught by Yang Qindong, everyone deeply understood how powerful this place was. It was not an exaggeration to say that if the 6th young master had any disloyalty, it would greatly shake the ruling regime of the Ming dynasty. This was a new and powerful force. As the earliest participants, one could imagine what kind of glory it would create in the future. If anyone were to leave now, that person would be a real fool. Therefore, with just one sentence, everyone tactfully shut their mouths. Perhaps they had their own selfish motives, but no matter what, they would not leave. Forget it. Yang Qindong saw everyone's reaction. He really wanted to say more. For example, if they had knowledge, they would be able to use their knowledge to be useful to the country and society in the future. Even if one day they were old or injured and had to leave the ranks of the military, they would have the ability to survive wherever they went. However, he also knew that it was a little too early to say these things to these people. Rather than trying to reason with them here, it was better to let them understand on their own. It did not matter if they did not understand. In the future, there would be more political instructors here. The ideological work would be left to them. As for these people, it would be best if they could adapt. If they could not, then they could only be eliminated. This was also the unchanging law of the jungle under the advancement of society. Fortunately, they were all cultured people. Even if they did not have the job in front of them, they could still do many other things. They would not face the predicament of having nothing to do. Take me to see the arsenal. Yang Qindong did not have the interest to continue talking with He Yang and the others. He turned around and left. Lung Song and Gao Xiong quickly led him. Tiger's mane originally did not leave Yang Qindong's side, but at this moment he stopped and glared fiercely at He Yang and the 5 instructors. These people used to be the young master's subordinates, and they graduated with excellent results. But now, they actually dared to disobey the young master's orders. Just based on this, he could take out his gun and execute them on the spot. However, Tiger's mane did not do so in the end. He had heard the young master say more than once that people would make mistakes, so they should be given a chance to correct themselves. He did not know whether the young master's kindness was good or bad, so he could not deal with this matter in private. However, he could not avoid using his eyes to warn them. He only coldly stared at them. When he saw the 5 of them lower their heads, he turned around and left. From beginning to end, he did not say a word. However, the more he was like this, the more pressure the 5 of them felt. At this moment, they finally faced the seriousness of the problem. They also understood that once the young master gave up on them, they would completely lose the life in front of them. It would be a feeling worse than death. Make it up immediately. He Yang was quite decisive in his actions. One of the instructors, Song Deshang, immediately supported him and said, "That's right. We will immediately reiterate our request. Those who do not pass the cultural test will definitely not become a real cold vanguard, no matter how good their performance is or how outstanding their training results are." The 5 instructors quickly reached an agreement. After that, this order was announced while Yang Qindong was still inspecting the munitions factory. After receiving the news, Tiger's mane walked to Yang Qindong's side and reported softly, "Young master, He Yang and the others have reiterated the importance of cultural studies. They are announcing it in the barracks right now." He only nodded. Yang Qindong could tolerate people making mistakes, and he would also give them a chance to correct their mistakes. However, this matter had already sounded the alarm for him. When he returned, he would have to consider grooming political instructors. This was already urgent. Chapter 30. Yang Chendong just nodded to show that he knew about it. Then he continued to talk to Wu Gang, the person in charge of the munitions factory. Now there are more and more people in the army, and the number of target practice is more and more frequent. Therefore, we need more and more ammunition. You can't just make bows and crossbows, because there will be fewer and fewer opportunities to use them in the future. It's time to shift your focus. Wu Gang nodded respectfully and replied, "Last time, young master told me about the process of making bullets. I also took some people to do experiments. I believe that soon, we can make our own bullets. But the shells still need some time." Very good. That's the way to do work. You need to be proactive. Don't wait until the last moment to remember what to do. Yang Chendong expressed his appreciation for Wu Gang's attitude and work progress. Finally, he asked with concern, "How is it? Is the gunpowder sufficient?" "It should be enough for now. Captain Gao Xiong met a fleet of gunpowder at sea last time, and they sent it to me. But the quality of the gunpowder is not very good, so it needs to be purified. For this reason, we have decided to find the raw materials to develop the gunpowder ourselves. In this way, the guarantee rate will be higher." Good. Wu Gang's answer and preparation made Yang Chendong very satisfied. Immediately, he expressed his approval for their work. At the same time, he ordered that all the staff of the munitions factory would be rewarded with 2 taels of silver. For those who worked actively and made outstanding contributions, the rewards would be doubled. He also said that whoever produced the first batch of ammunition would be rewarded with 100 taels of silver for each worker who participated in the improvement. After inspecting the munitions factory, Yang Chendong went to the furniture factory and met Li Xuanfu, the person in charge here. Li Xuanfu made a lot of money for Yang Chendong when he made the toilet, so Yang Chendong knew him very well. During the conversation, he not only affirmed the work of Li Xuanfu and others, but also expressed his expectations for their work. That was, they should continue to work hard and make more furniture of better quality for people to use. In the cement factory, he met the person in charge, Jing Guang. As for the function of cement, Yang Chendong knew it very well. While encouraging and affirming their work, he also said that once they had a new base, they would need a large amount of cement. At that time, whether it was the construction of the spacious cement road or the construction of the barracks and residences, they would all be of use. He could not afford to neglect the proper business. Jing Guang was a man who didn't like to talk too much. All he did was guarantee that he would produce more backup cement to ensure that they wouldn't screw up when needed. From noon to afternoon, Yang Chendong went to many places and gave very pertinent opinions on some of the things he saw. After having dinner with Lung Song, Gao Xiong, and the others in the barracks, he strolled to Luan Qi's house. During the day, Yang Chendong went to a few factories, but he didn't go to the power plant. This made Luan Qi very nervous. Even during dinner, she was absent-minded and didn't eat much. "That's enough. What are you worried about? I said that you would be in charge of the power plant, but who knows what it is? Even you don't know much about it. Since you haven't made any achievements, do you still want the 6th young master to come to your place for inspection? What would he come to see?" Zhou Hua was lively and loud. Seeing her husband's absent-minded appearance, she scolded him angrily. Luan Qi was already in a bad mood. Naturally, she didn't want to quarrel with Zhou Hua. She just sat there silently. Her youngest daughter, Xiaoyu, saw this and walked over with small steps. "Daddy, don't be angry with Mommy. Actually, the 6th young master is very nice. He hugged me during the day and gave me candy that can blow bubbles." As she spoke, Xiaoyu carefully raised a piece of colorless chewing gum that was wrapped in a piece of cloth high up in the air. The chewing gum no longer had the taste of sugar and couldn't blow bubbles. However, Xiaoyu still couldn't bear to throw it away. She carefully kept it. "Xiaoyu, be good. Daddy isn't angry." Luan Qi naturally wouldn't tell her the worries in his heart. He had always been the smartest in the eyes of others. Of course, he didn't want to admit that he didn't know what electricity was. Although he had read books and had some theoretical understanding, he had never seen the real thing. He still couldn't imagine what electricity was. Why did it say that it could emit light and heat? It didn't seem to make sense at all. Wouldn't it have the same effect as the sun? It was too unbelievable. It was too difficult for him to do something that even he couldn't understand. Wan Qi had his own thoughts. Xiao Yu couldn't tell at all. She just stared at the colorless chewing gum in her hand in a daze. Only one piece was too little. She wanted to have a lot. Then she could also blow bubbles like the sixth young master. Then, in front of her friends, she would be so glorious. Sixth young master, why are you here? Zhou Hua's anxious voice suddenly sounded from outside the door. There was even a hint of fear in her voice. What? You have some kind of monster here that eats people. Can I come? Yang Chendong's kind voice sounded. Then, the door curtain was pulled open. The sixth young master, who was dressed in camouflage, strode in. The sky was already dark. There was only a kerosene lamp in the room, so it was still a little dim. When Yang Chendong stepped in, Wan Qi didn't recognize him at all. However, Xiao Yu, who was in his arms, had good eyes. She recognized Yang Chendong at a glance. Suddenly, she jumped out of her father's arms happily and jogged to greet him. Yang Chendong was very cooperative as he bent down to take Xiao Yu over and carried her up in his arms. Xiao Yu seemed to be naturally close to Yang Chendong. She wasn't afraid at all. Instead, she wrapped her arms around his neck and giggled. Big brother, do you still have chewing gum? Xiao Yu is useless. I blew it for the whole afternoon but didn't blow a single bubble. You said before that I can't keep it in my mouth if it doesn't have any fragrance. I had no choice but to spit it out. As she spoke, Xiao Yu felt wronged. In the end, she was about to cry. In both Yang Chendong's previous life and this life, he was most afraid of women crying. Although Xiao Yu was not yet 10 years old, once she cried, it didn't matter her age. Okay, Xiao Yu, don't cry. Big brother still has some chewing gum. I'll give it to you, okay? After speaking, Yang Chendong took out a whole box of chewing gum from the pocket of his camouflage uniform like magic. There were a total of 100 pieces inside. This was what he wanted to give to Xiao Yu. Suddenly, there was so much chewing gum in her hand. At that moment, Xiao Yu's face was like the sky after the rain. She didn't look like she was going to cry. Instead, she looked happy. Then, she couldn't help but kiss Yang Chendong's face. Then, she giggled and said, Big brother is so nice. Xiao Yu likes you. I like Xiao Yu too. Yang Chendong laughed happily in a good mood. His mental age was already over 40. A girl who was less than 10 years old was indeed a child in his eyes. However, he forgot that he was only 16 years old. At that moment, Zhou Hua was standing behind Yang Chendong. When she saw that her daughter and the sixth young master hit it off so well and that the two of them even said that they liked each other, she couldn't help but be overjoyed. When she saw that her husband, Wan Qi, was still stunned and couldn't recognize Yang Chendong's identity, she couldn't help but walk forward angrily and kick him lightly. Idiot, hurry up and recognize him. This is the sixth young master. When he heard that the person who came was the sixth young master, Wan Qi was also stunned. During the day, he only saw him from afar. In addition, he wasn't wearing a camouflage uniform at that time. The light in the room was dim, so naturally he couldn't recognize him. Now that he knew his identity, of course, he had a terrified expression on his face. After staying at the illegal docks for a long time, there was no one who hadn't heard of the sixth young master's name. Wan Qi was also influenced by him and had always been looking forward to it. Now that he finally saw the real person, he was naturally very happy. However, he didn't like to socialize. Other than standing there and smiling foolishly, he really didn't know what to do. Yang Chendong was more proactive. He first sent Xiao Yu into Zhou Hua's arms. Then, he looked at the reserved Wan Qi and said, What's wrong? Mr. Wan, I'm at your house. Aren't you going to invite me to sit down? Oh, sixth young master, please sit down, please sit down. Wan Qi suddenly realized at this time. He quickly retreated and found a chair for Yang Chendong to sit down. After taking the chair, Yang Chendong first casually looked around the room. Although the area wasn't very big, it was clean. He couldn't help but nod his head in satisfaction. Sixth young master, my house is really too simple and crude. Luan Qi noticed Yang Chendong's expression and said with an embarrassed face. It's pretty good. Although the room isn't big, it's really neat and clean. It's just that the light is a little too dim. Yang Chendong seemed to have inadvertently found a problem. Then he shouted outside. Bring the things in? Yes. The voices of Tiger's Mane and the others sounded outside the door. Then, two things that looked like black planks and another thing that others couldn't name were carried into the room. Put them on the ground. When Yang Chendong saw that the things were ready, he stood up with a smile on his face. Then, his pair of nimble hands constantly fiddled with the things that were carried into the room, one by one. From beginning to end, it only took 1 or 2 minutes. Finally, he took out a transparent glass ball and placed it on a place in the room with a hook. After checking the wires and confirming that there were no problems with all the wires, Yang Chendong raised his head and looked at the puzzled faces of Luan Qi, Zhou Hua, Xiaoyu, Tiger's Mane, Beta Persei, and Yang Si. He said, "Are you guys ready? It's time to witness a miracle." Chapter 31. Of course, none of the people present knew this famous line. Everyone still looked at Yang Chendong with a puzzled expression. Until now, they still couldn't figure out what the sixth young master was doing. What would these things do if they were brought into the house? Yang Chendong saw everyone's puzzled expression. He knew that the foreplay was in vain, but it didn't matter. He was looking forward to seeing everyone's reaction when the electricity was turned on. However, in order to avoid any accidents, he reminded them in a friendly manner, no matter what happens later, don't move around. Even if you fall, sit on the spot. Don't touch anyone else. It'll be bad if you get hurt. What does that mean, sixth young master? Zhou Hua was so curious that she couldn't help but ask. Just listen to the sixth young master. Seeing that Tiger's Mane and the other two didn't have any doubts, and only his wife was still asking questions, Luan Qi reminded them. It's nothing. In short, no matter what happens later, don't panic and don't move around casually. Yang Chendong knew that no matter how much he said, it wouldn't be as surprising as seeing it with their own eyes. Therefore, after laughing, he connected the last wire to the battery holder. When he did this, Zhou Hua was still puzzled. She couldn't help but ask curiously, "Sixth young master, why are you standing on the spot and not moving around?" Before Zhou Hua could finish her sentence, she couldn't help but scream first. Then it was Xiaoyu, Luan Qi and Tiger's Mane and the other two who couldn't help but scream. Outside Luan Qi's house, there were 10 soldiers sent to protect the sixth young master. Although this was an illegal dock, it was supposed to be safe. However, the sixth young master's safety couldn't be compromised. Therefore, after a discussion between Leng Song and Gao Xiong, they decided to send 10 soldiers, led by Teng Shan. All of a sudden, a series of screams rang out from inside, giving them a fright. However, what made the 10 of them even more puzzled was that they were originally hidden in the dark, but now, their figures were revealed by the bright lights in the room. None of their concealment was effective anymore. What's going on? Let's go in and take a look. Teng Shan reacted quickly. At first, his eyes lit up as if it was daytime. But after 2 seconds, he reacted and wanted to go into the house to check on the sixth young master's safety. Fortunately, Yang Chendong's voice came from the room. "I'm fine. You guys can stay outside." Was there really nothing wrong with the room? Of course, that was impossible. Because at this moment, everyone in the room had their mouths and eyes wide open, as if they had seen a ghost. The lights were on, and the solar generator was working. The 2 solar panels were connected to a large battery, and the voltage was enough to illuminate the central room, which was only a dozen square meters, as if it was daytime. The light that suddenly lit up was so dazzling and unbelievable to everyone. Fortunately, Yang Chendong had warned them beforehand, so no one ran away instinctively. However, the disappointing Zhou Hua still fell to the ground with her daughter in her arms. Tiger's Mane and the others did not fare any better. Although they did not move around, they were still flustered at that moment and did not know what to do. On the other hand, Luan Qi was first shocked by the white light in front of him and sat on the stool. However, when he came to his senses, his eyes lit up and he asked excitedly with a slightly hoarse voice, Is this electricity? Yes, this is electricity. Yang Chendong gave a very accurate answer. Based on the theory that seeing was believing, Yang Chendong arranged for Tiger's mane and the others to put the 2 solar panels under the sun to absorb the light. The reason why he chose to come to Luan Qi's house at night was to give him a deeper impression. Now, it seemed that the effect was quite good. Is this electricity? It really can emit light and heat. After Luan Qi knew that this was the effect of electricity, he was the first to calm down. He got up and walked to the light bulb, then gently reached out his hand and felt the heat coming from it. Yes, electricity itself has the effect of emitting light and heat. If we use it well, then in the future, every house can be as bright as day at night. At that time, men won't have to worry about hurting their eyes when they study, women won't have to worry about hurting their eyes when they sew, and even children won't have to worry about bumping into things when they play. Yang Chendong was talking about the benefits of electricity to people in this era. Luan Qi listened attentively, and his mind was constantly looking forward to it. It was as if he could already see how it would look like when electricity was everywhere and brought benefits to people. Luan Qi was not the only one. Even Hu Mang and the others felt their hearts surge with shock. Their young master was too amazing. Not only did he have those powerful firearms, but he could also write exciting stories that made people not want to sleep and only wanted to read the next chapter. Now, he could even come up with something that could emit light and heat. Could it be that the young master was the reincarnation of a deity? Otherwise, how could he have these spells and abilities? In terms of calmness, Xiao Yu was probably the calmest in the entire house. After all, she was a child. When faced with something new, she was the fastest to calm down after being surprised. Her beautiful big eyes fell on everyone one by one. When she saw that everyone was looking at Yang Chendong with reverence and even worship, she was very happy in her heart because she knew that her big brother would always be the most powerful person. Time passed slowly. Slowly, the people in the house got used to it. Luan Qi took out a pen and paper excitedly. He had never seen electricity before. Although Yang Chendong said that it was lively in the book that he had read, seeing it was better than hearing about it 100 times. Now that he had seen it for himself, he knew that the book was not exaggerating at all. This electricity was indeed very powerful and very good. Since the 6th young master could bring electricity, he must be very familiar with it. If he still did not know that he should take the opportunity to ask for advice, then he was really a blockhead. This time, he came with the intention of dispelling his doubts. Yang Chendong had already prepared himself for Luan Qi's questions. For this reason, he had also learned some knowledge about electricity. Of course, that was only the most basic knowledge. For example, electric current was divided into direct current and alternating current. Electric wires were divided into fire wires and spirit wires, etc. However, these things that seemed simple in the future still brought great shock to Luan Qi. Combined with some of the things recorded in the book, he finally had a preliminary understanding of this new thing. Luan Qi, there are many ways to generate electricity. For example, coal can generate electricity, wind can generate electricity, light can generate electricity, water can generate electricity, etc. These require you to experiment step by step. This requires a long process of understanding. You can't rush it. Of course, you can tell me what you need. This young master will do his best to satisfy you. I just hope that in your hands, electricity can be owned by people as soon as possible. It can serve mankind and benefit mankind. Yes, I will work hard to learn and do it with my heart. Luan Qi saw electricity for the first time. It was the first time that he had a certain understanding of it. At this moment, his heart could no longer be calm. He even hoped that he could have the ability to not be tired and not sleep. That way, he could study electricity earlier. I believe you can do it. He patted Luan Qi's shoulder. How about this? In the future, you will be the factory director of the power plant. Oh right, I also heard that you are developing a machine to make clothes. Very good, you can tell me anything you need. When I am not around, you can also look for Lung Song or Gao Xiong. They will unconditionally satisfy you. As for the future factory director, I think it will be better for your wife to be the one. Zhou Hua, who was standing on the side, didn't expect the sixth young master to talk about her. He even said that he wanted her to be the factory director, although she didn't know what the factory director would do. But thinking about it, it should be an official. Thinking that an illiterate woman like her could be an official, Zhou Hua instinctively wanted to decline. Seeing that Zhou Hua wanted to speak, Yang Chendong laughed and said, "Well, you don't have to refuse. I am not giving face to anyone. I know that you are skillful and have the ability to do so. Of course, it is not so easy to be an official." With a smile, Yang Chendong reached into his arms and took out a few drawings. He handed them to Zhou Hua and said, "These are the drawings of some clothes. You can study them carefully. If there is anything you don't understand, you can find me at any time while I am here." Those were some sample drawings of military uniforms, as well as women's bras, underwear, and cheongsams. Most of the clothes of the Ming dynasty were long gowns and robes, which didn't look capable at all. Most of the clothes of the army were two-person battle jackets, which looked loose and not capable at all. It was far less practical than camouflage clothes. Although there were a lot of military uniforms in the warehouse, after all, the more they took out, the less there would be. For such a large number of consumables, of course, it was necessary to prepare for a rainy day. Yang Chendong knew that if these things were done well, not only would it be beneficial to him, but it could also be sold in large quantities and eventually become a very profitable industry. For this, he also arranged for people to buy a lot of cloth and silk. As for manpower, there were many men and women in the illegal docks. They could be used. It was equivalent to finding a job to better stabilize people's hearts. Electricity appeared. Just after Yang Chendong left, the illegal docks were so restless that night. People came to Luan Chi's house in groups just to see this treasure that could be as bright as day. Unfortunately, they could only see it from afar and not up close because Luan Chi protected these things as if they were his life. Even Gao Xiong and Lung Song could only stand outside the house and didn't have the opportunity to enter the house to see. Xiao Yu, on the other hand, took this opportunity to show off. Her little friends were all gathered in front of her house, looking enviously at the bright electric lights. They were jealous of the chewing gum in Xiao Yu's mouth and the blissful smile on her face, which was already able to spit out bubbles. Chapter 32. That night, there were probably not many people who could sleep peacefully in the entire Black Wharf. Yang Chendong was one of them. After he handed over the power-generating equipment to Luan Chi, it was equivalent to him unloading a burden. He also believed that with the other party's persistence and hard work, it was only a matter of time before electricity was created. After sleeping until dawn, Yang Chendong went to the barracks to accompany the soldiers for a 10-kilometer run. After eating a simple meal, he went to find a person called Kong'an. He was going to appoint him as the head of the paper mill. Paper making not only included the technique of making paper, but also toilet paper, diapers, sanitary napkins, and napkins. In this era, the things people used to relieve themselves were known as the 5-flower white door. Those who had no money would simply use a wooden stick. Only those who had enough money would use some coarse paper. Only those who were extremely rich would use soft cloth. If there was toilet paper, it would replace everything. This was a good thing that could promote the development of society and make a lot of money. How could Yang Chendong forget about it? Not to mention the uses of diapers, sanitary napkins, and napkins. It was definitely a good thing that one would not give up after using it once. Kong'an was a person who had done some research on paper making. Later on, he offended his superior and was kicked out of the capital. When Yang Chendong found out about this, he asked Yang San to personally find him. Needless to say, the deputy director of the security bureau was quite competent. Kong'an was successfully found and sent to the Black Wharf. People who had the basic knowledge could do things with twice the result with half the effort. This was also thanks to Dezong's omnipotence and omnipotence. There was a comprehensive record of the progress of the paper-making technique in the book. Now that he had made some changes, he handed it over to Kong'an. With the cooperation of the garment factory's director, Zhou Hua, he believed that it wouldn't take long for him to receive a generous return. The construction of the weapon factory, furniture factory, garment factory, power plant, cement factory, and paper factory immediately promoted the development of society and technology. At the same time, it was also considered a business activity for the sake of making money in the future. It was just that a strong economy needed enough military support. Otherwise, all of this would just be a wedding dress for others. How to improve the strength of his equipment was the most important thing. Therefore, in the following period of time, Yang Chendong began to take the initiative to teach some courses that no one had ever taken before. For example, fighting, diving, flying, etc. The so-called confrontation referred to the division of the army into two groups to fight against each other. It could also be called a drill. Until now, none of the members of Cold Front had seen blood since training. This was unacceptable. After all, training and actual combat were two different things. If they didn't want problems to arise on the battlefield, they would have to start from actual combat and carry out more exercises. Only then would everyone be able to find their own shortcomings. Drills and confrontations were the best way. One side used cold weapons to represent the strength of the modern army, while the other side used hot weapons to attack. They also carried out several exercises with the goal of seizing cities and seizing islands. Many problems were found and corrected. Of course, diving did not refer to ordinary swimming. It referred to deep diving with special preparations. It could cross the ocean and guarantee that one would appear on a certain island without any signs of life. When the other party did not notice, one could suddenly launch a surprise attack. One could imagine how intimidating it would be to the other party. Speaking of flying, Yang Chendong had already found individual powered umbrellas in the big warehouse. Imagine if an army suddenly appeared in the sky and attacked the ground from the air. Wouldn't it give people the feeling that a divine army had descended from the sky? Unfortunately, the requirements to use the powered umbrellas were too strict. Without professional training and specialized clothing, it was very difficult to fly and land safely. For this reason, the sixth young master thought of a transitional method, which was to build some hot air balloons first. Hot air balloons were relatively simple to build and easy to operate. After everyone got used to staying in the air, they could start training with the powered umbrellas. That way, the accident rate would be reduced. However, even though they were hot air balloons when they were made to fly, it still shocked Leng Song, Gao Xiong, and the others. They could not understand how people could fly. It completely went against their understanding. Regarding this, Yang Chendong said one sentence without holding back. Knowledge is power. Just this one sentence set off a wave of learning in the barracks. After the last incident, no one dared to say that Wenhua class was not important anymore. They were afraid that if they were too anxious, they would be kicked out. When Yang Chendong was there, whether it was the soldiers in the barracks or some of the residents who moved in from the Black Dock, they were all excited and happy. However, all good things must come to an end. Seeing that the new year was about to come, the sixth young master had to leave in the first month of the 11th year of the Orthodox dynasty. Originally, the duration of the camp this time had exceeded their previous expectations. Previously, they planned to stay for about 5 days before leaving. However, because of the excitement, Yang Chendong forgot about the time and stayed for nearly 2 months. Now that the end of the year was near, it involved some matters of ancestral worship. The sixth young master, who was the only one left in the Yang family mansion, had to rush back. However, before Yang Chendong was about to leave, he started to recruit people. He recruited children between the ages of 13 and 16, and stated that as long as they were willing to learn, there were no gender restrictions. After 2 months of contact, everyone knew the sixth young master's ability and power. Naturally, there were many people who signed up. Almost all the men and women of the right age in the Black Dock signed up. There were more than 300 people. Yang Chendong was going to personally teach these people and let them enter the army as political teachers. Sometimes, a military's political work was even more important than its military ability. After all, the more a disobedient army could fight, the more worrying it would be. Yang Chendong still remembered clearly how Yang and the others had advised him not to focus on cultural studies. He didn't want the same mistake to happen again. The reason he recruited these children was to prepare for a rainy day so that there wouldn't be any problems in the army. What Yang Chendong did not expect was that the enthusiasm for signing up was so high. Originally, he planned to only take in about 30 people. After all, the army was still too weak and did not need so many political teachers. Moreover, if there were too many people, he would not be able to take care of them. However, in the face of such a heated scene, he still decided to expand the recruitment. However, he only limited the number of people to 50. If there were more, he could not guarantee the quality. As such, when Yang Chendong said that he would only take in 50 people, fierce competition immediately began, and some people started to find ways to get in through the back door. Among them, what Yang Chendong did not expect was that the first person to find a way to get in through the back door was Zhou Hua. She brought her third son, Xiao Chen, and her youngest daughter, Xiao Yu. As soon as Zhou Hua entered Yang Chendong's office in the barracks, her face turned red. Obviously, she also knew that this kind of behavior was somewhat inappropriate. However, for the sake of her children's future, she still came without hesitation. Sixth young master, my Luan Qi is shy. He did not want to come here, so I brought Xiao Chen and Xiao Yu. Can you take a look and see if you can accept them? Zhou Hua asked with a face full of expectation. Yang Chendong had already heard about Luan Qi's family situation from Tiger's Mane. There were a total of 7 children. The eldest and second children were already of age and had signed up for the army. The fourth and fifth children were girls. Although the sixth child was a man, he had been in poor health since he was young. Therefore, only the third child, Xiao Chen, was left. He had just turned 15 years old, and Xiao Yu would be 10 years old after the new year. Most importantly, she admired Yang Chendong very much. This was why Zhou Hua brought her to try out this time. In fact, she did not have much hope. As long as her third son was selected, it was a good thing. He really wanted to reject this method of getting in through the back door. He wanted to create a fair competition system. However, Yang Chendong also knew that the selection of political teachers was different from other things. These people's backgrounds were very important. This was because if something went wrong with them, it would be a real problem. Luan Qi was already the director of the power plant, and Zhou Hua was the director of the garment factory. Both of them were contributing to the development of the illegal dock, or rather, Yang Chendong's power. Naturally, their children would have no problems in the political examination. It was more reassuring to use people like this. Since Zhou Hua had come in person, it was not good to refuse. He could not hurt her feelings. Yang Chendong thought about it for a while and nodded gently. Xiao Chen, can you read? I can read, sixth young master. I can read, and I've also learned the new arithmetic you taught me. I can add and subtract numbers within 2 digits without any problem. Xiao Chen finally had the chance to speak, and he cherished it very much. Okay, then pack up and come back to Jianing with me in 2 days. However, you still have to take the written test. Xiao Chen's physique was considered strong. She was cultured and had a good foundation. Yang Chendong nodded and accepted her. As soon as she heard Yang Chendong agree, Zhou Hua was overjoyed and said excitedly, "Quick, thank the sixth young master." Xiao Chen was also quick-witted. He immediately knelt on the ground with a plop and kowtowed to settle the matter. However, what was a little ridiculous was that they were only 2 years apart in age. However, no matter how one looked at it, Yang Chendong was too outstanding. Zhou Hua was already very satisfied with the matter of her third son and Xiao Chen. She was ready to leave with her son and daughter. However, at this moment, Xiao Yu refused. She used all her strength to not let Zhou Hua take her away. Instead, she stubbornly said to Yang Chendong, "Big brother, Xiao Yu also wants to follow you." "You're too young." Yang Chendong shook his head. Xiao Yu would only be 10 years old after the new year. First of all, she was not qualified in terms of age. "I'm not young and I will grow up. The most important thing is that I listen to Big Brother more than anyone else." Xiao Yu shook her head like a rattledrum. Her eyes began to fill with tears. Xiao Yu's request put Yang Chendong in a difficult position. He had said that he would only accept children between the ages of 13 and 16. Xiao Yu was not qualified in terms of age. If he accepted her, what would others think? What would they think? Chapter 33. Yang Chendong was in a difficult position. He really liked Xiao Yu. Of course, he treated her like a child. But if he opened the back door because of this, would it have a bad impact? When Xiao Yu saw his troubled expression, she knew that there was a chance. She immediately gathered her courage and said, "Big brother, I'm just your little sister. I'm not considered one of the 50 people, right?" After being corrected by Xiao Yu, Yang Chendong was suddenly enlightened. Yes, he could have said that she was his little sister. In the past 2 months, Xiao Yu would look for him whenever she had something to do. In the end, even Tiger's Mane and the others did not stop her. This was something that everyone knew. Naturally, there would not be any problems when he brought her along when he left. He did not expect that while he was still worrying, Xiao Yu would come up with a solution and an excuse first. This also made Yang Chendong look at her in a new light. "Well, if that's the case, then you can follow me. You don't have to take the exam." Yang Chendong agreed, which made Xiao Yu very happy. She held her mother's hand and shook it constantly, as if she was asking for credit, but also as if she was expressing her joy. Zhou Hua also did not expect that this time, the 2 children would be able to follow the 6th young master. In particular, the younger daughter was even more amazing. She became the only person who could follow the 6th young master without taking the exam. Xiao Yu's matter was just an interlude. Next, there were also people who wanted to go through the back door. Yang Chendong met some of them, such as Jing Shuang, the son of the cement factory director Jing Guang, Kong Jie, the son of the paper factory director Kongan, and a few others. However, he did not meet most of them. He just found a random reason to reject them. 3 days later, the exam began. It was divided into 2 parts, civil and military. The military part was to run a 3-kilometer race. If one could keep up with the team and not fall behind, they would pass. The civil part was also the most important part. It was to test arithmetic and write an article on understanding the illegal docks. It was stipulated that words that could not be written could be replaced by pinyin. From this, one could see what they were thinking in their hearts. They also held the initiative in their hands to decide who they wanted to recruit. The test lasted for a day, and the final results were announced at night. Naturally, some people were happy while others were sad. Fortunately, the Black Wharf was a place where everything flourished, and there were many things that could be done. Moreover, Yang Chendong also said that if there was a chance in the future, he would come here to recruit people to his side. Thus, the impact of the incident gradually subsided, and those who were not selected also returned to their normal state of mind. Early the next morning, Yang Chendong left the Black Pier. The selection was sent out before the sun rose, and it was requested that every person who was selected not be sent off by their parents. Otherwise, their quota would be revoked. This was also the first lesson that Yang Chendong taught everyone. Stay away from your parents and learn to be independent. Although this seemed a little cruel, it was beneficial for growth. Just like today's education, there was too much emphasis on grades. Most of the children were focused on studying, and very few teachers and schools paid attention to nurturing the children's character. Yang Chendong's way of doing things was to start with independence. Then he would let them suffer. Only such children could understand the warmth and coldness of human nature more deeply, and their chances of success when they grew up would naturally be much higher. 1447 AD, the 11th year of the Zhengtong dynasty. The New Year's bell was rung. From this moment on, Yang Chendong was 17 years old. It had been nearly 2 years since he came to the Ming dynasty. From nothing to something, his power had developed to today. It was likely that other than a limited number of people, no one knew how powerful he was now. The new year was at the Yang family's old house. As usual, the servants of the old house were given silver taels to celebrate the festive year, and then they went to worship the ancestors. After that, Yang Chendong did not return to the old house. Instead, he went to the Yang family village in the name of breathing fresh air and looking for inspiration to write stories. There were 50 people there. 51 students were waiting for him to teach. They were going to face a 3-month study, which was mainly cultural classes and supplemented by physical training. The training was in full swing, and the Yang family village also showed a semi-closed management. Although people were allowed to enter and leave, the inspection was particularly strict. During this time, Yang San had already found a few people who were suitable for intelligence and security work. The standard to assess whether or not they could become official members was to closely monitor everyone who entered the Yang family village and find suspicious people. It was said that it was easy to do things with money. Now, in the streets and alleys of Jiangning Prefecture, who knew how many pairs of eyes of the Yang family were watching? They were either ordinary peddlers, waiters, or the boss of a grocery store. These people were not on the security bureau's list, and they did not even know who they were gathering intelligence for. These people only knew one thing, and that was that as long as they reported unusual things, they might be able to receive silver. If the matter was very important, they would receive even more rewards. People would die for money. Under such an incentive mechanism, naturally, a large amount of intelligence would be sent to Yang San every day. He would then hand over the valuable information to Tiger's Mane and give it to the 6th young master for review. With this mechanism, it could be said that once someone from the imperial court came to Jiangning Prefecture, any unfamiliar face would be immediately discovered. In fact, all this was Yang Chendong's overthinking and caution. No one in the imperial court would target him, a mere 9th-level governor of Jiangning Prefecture. If someone really wanted to deal with the Yang family, they would target the young masters and young ladies of the Yang family in the capital. Moreover, with Yang Rong's death, the power of the Yang family collapsed, and it could be said that it was difficult for everyone to protect themselves. Otherwise, it would have been more than a year since any of his relatives came to the old house of the Yang family to visit him. Of course, Yang Chendong's understanding was that these brothers and sisters must have their own difficulties. Perhaps they were in the capital and had no choice. In any case, he had heard from the old steward Yang Chendong that the young masters and young ladies of the Yang family did not have a good life in the capital. Even if they wanted to leave the capital, they had to report to their superiors, which was a little troublesome. Yang Chendong understood them a little. Moreover, after all, he had inherited this body. If possible, he would help them if he could. Indeed, no one in the imperial court paid attention to Yang Chendong. He just wrote a few wonderful stories in the Yang Bao. In the eyes of the big shots, it was just a side trick. He was only 17 years old, but he could be described as immature. Even so, no one would pay attention to him. Not to mention that the imperial court had its own difficulties. On the 17th day of the 11th year of the Zhengtong dynasty, the Minister of War, Kuang Yi, waited for a memorial. Wala Yeshen annexed the Arutai tribe when his father was leaving, and he grew stronger day by day. The Wara wanted to invade the border, which caused the tension on the border. In the 3rd month of the same year, Ingzong ordered the World School to take the entrance exam for students. It meant that more students could be recruited. They were not official students, but in the form of reserves. It was an act of accumulating talents for the country. But it was tantamount to expanding the power of the landowning households and increasing the number of people who had special privileges. What was the special privilege at that time? To put it bluntly, they didn't have to pay grain for farming, and they didn't have to pay taxes for doing business. And these students occupied a large amount of the country's land, causing the quality of life of the commoners to drop by more than one level. Many people worked hard for a year, and even when they had a good harvest at the end of the year, they still couldn't afford to pay the taxes. It was as the saying went, when the people prosper, the people suffer, but when the people die, the people suffer. Compared to the changes in the outside world, Yang Chendong was very well behaved. He stayed in the Yang family manor, saying that he was writing stories in peace and praying for his parents. In reality, he only used a little bit of time to write. Most of his time was spent on teaching these students. After such a long time, the manuscript of The Smiling, Proud Wanderer had already been completed, and the entire book had already been published. This time, many copies were sent to the capital, satisfying the appetites of some rich young masters and noble ladies. Following which, he started on the fourth book, The Legend of Chu Liuxiang. Once the new book was released, it was as popular as before. This time, it was released at the same time. Not only in Jianing residence, but also in the capital, it caused a frenzy of book fans. In the Hu residence, the elegantly dressed young lady Hu Yan was reading the latest issue of Yang Pao, which was serializing the legend of Chu Liuxiang. Pay! For some reason, Hu Yan suddenly scolded lightly, and then her face flushed red. That appearance was really shy and lovely. The maid Xiaoqing was dozing off when she was abruptly awakened by the young lady's movements. Then, she hurriedly looked around, and when she didn't see anyone else, she pouted and shook her head. Young lady, are you going to scold Dong Shuai in your heart again? What Dong Shuai? Hu Yan was confused. She knew about Xiang Shuai, and it was referring to Chu Liuxiang. But who was this Dong Shuai? What? Young lady doesn't even know about Dong Shuai? That's the name that everyone gave to the sixth young master of the Yang clan, Yang Chendong. In the book, he wrote that Chu Liuxiang had 8 close female friends, and that he liked all of them. Then, isn't this person also an affectionate young master? That's why everyone called him Dong Shuai. Xiaoqing brought out the words that she heard from others when she bought the Yang Pao. Hearing such an explanation, Hu Yan's face turned red and she said, "That's right, that Yang clan's 6th young master must be a dissolute young master. People say that one can judge one's actions based on one's observation." Hu Yan looked very angry. In fact, the reason why she was angry while reading the book was because she hated Chu Liuxiang for loving every woman he saw. She didn't believe that a man could truly love every woman by his side. Although it was said that the young master of a large clan would take a few concubines, that was only for the sake of having a prosperous family. How could a man truly love every woman he saw? At the very least, she didn't believe it. Chapter 34. As a result, she began to question Yang Chendong's character. At the same time, she was conflicted. What kind of man was he? She could write a hero like Gu Jing, a sheik like Li Xuanhuan, a real man like Ling Huchong, and now a sentimental man like Chu Liuxiang? Which one was the real him? The more she couldn't figure it out, the more curious she became. Hu Yan couldn't help but fall into a state of distress. It was said that no one knew a daughter better than her mother. The person who understood Hu Yan the most was her maid, Xiaoqing. Seeing how troubled her mistress was, she naturally had to stand up and help her. She immediately took the initiative to say, "Mistress, I heard that Lord Hu has accepted a mission to the south to investigate some military matters. Why don't you let him go to Jianing Manor and meet this Yang Chendong? Wouldn't everything be clear then?" Let your father go? Can he agree? Although Hu Yan's heart was somewhat moved after hearing this, it was more of a lack of confidence. Why wouldn't he agree? This is a father-in-law looking at his son-in-law. Besides, it's just a matter of convenience. What's wrong with that? As long as mistress uses your entanglement technique, Lord Hu won't disagree. Xiaoqing seemed to know her mistress's father very well and appeared to have a card up her sleeve. What do you mean by a father-in-law looking at his son-in-law? Xiaoqing, you dare to speak nonsense? You're asking for a beating. Hu Yan's face immediately turned red, making her look even cuter and more enchanting. But at the same time, she began to chase after Xiaoqing, unwilling to give up. No one knew whether Xiaoqing managed to catch up with her. But when Hu Zhangning returned home that night, Hu Yan took the initiative to rush over and then. In the Yang Manor, the learning and training of the 51 people was nearing the end. During the learning period, everyone's physical strength was trained. Perhaps it was because of his young age, but he learned everything very quickly. Although he was very tired after a day of hard work, he relied on his young age and good food to recover his body very quickly. In terms of fighting strength, they were naturally inferior to the first batch of Lung Feng. But in terms of loyalty, they were definitely higher. In particular, Xiao Yu had played a huge role in this. Perhaps she had inherited her father, Luan Qi's smart genes. While the others were still studying with their heads down, Xiaoyu was the first to propose that the sixth young master should be the center and that the sixth young master should be the leader. In particular, her learning ability was very strong. Coupled with the fact that she was Yang Chendong's little sister, although she was young, her reputation was not low. Even many children who were older than her lowered their heads and followed her lead. Not only that, but Xiaoyu and Xiaoyin were also very close. The two of them were 8 years apart, but sometimes they were as close as real sisters. Yang Chendong couldn't quite understand this. However, all he needed to know was that these two were on his side. They could do whatever they wanted. With Prestige and Xiaoyin on her side, Xiaoyu had more opportunities to see Yang Chendong alone. Under the constant begging, the sixth young master finally gave in to the young girl's attacks and handed over 3 songs. In the end, these 3 songs were all military songs. The first was the People's Liberation Army's military song. Yang Chendong called it a military song. Onward, onward, onward. Our troops face the sun, stepping on the land of our motherland. The second song was Coming Back from Target Practice. The sun sets in the west, the red clouds fly in the sky. The soldiers return from target practice, return from target practice. The red flags in the wind reflect the rosy clouds. Happy songs fill the sky. The third song was Red from the East. Red from the East, the sun rises. The country has produced a Yang Chendong. He seeks happiness for the people. He's the savior of the people. Reality had already proven that military songs could raise morale and strengthen the cohesion of soldiers. Many times, when military songs played, the soldiers' hormones would rise, and they would become excited and excited. The 3 military songs, especially the third one, had unknowingly raised his status. This was something Yang Chendong had thought about a long time ago. An army needed its own soul to ensure stability, and he was undoubtedly the best candidate. As for whether or not he had the suspicion of being Wang Pe, that was up to each person. Not only did Yang Chendong hand over 3 songs, but he also handed over Little Rain's army song. The effect of the army song was great. Firstly, it could unite the morale and unite the people. A song could tie everyone's hearts together, and they could sing together loudly to show the majestic morale of the team. Secondly, it could inspire people and relieve pressure. Soldiers were already under a lot of pressure. A good song could encourage everyone to persevere together. They would bleed and sweat but not cry. They would not fall behind even if they lost skin and flesh. Thirdly, it could liven up the atmosphere. The military officers were strict, and the atmosphere was dull. The leader of the team sometimes lacked human touch, so he could liven up the atmosphere by singing. Fourthly, it could promote mutual understanding, understand each other, live in harmony, and form a united front. Like Who's the Hero, let's sing and compete. Hee, let's compete. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, we've been waiting so hard. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, we've been waiting so anxiously. If I ask you to come, you'll come. You're too shy. If I ask you to sing, you won't sing. You're too shy. Hee, too shy, etc. Hearing these things, Xiao Yu's eyes widened, and her face was full of disbelief. At this moment, she worshipped the sixth young master even more. She wanted to know more about this big brother. What was in his head? Why did he have so many new and good things? She thought that she was already quite smart, but compared to the sixth young master, she was not even worth a finger. The military song was brought to the 51-people team by Xiao Yu, and it was quickly spread. These children were smart to begin with. After they read and learned how to read, they quickly entered the period of proficiency. Time slowly entered the middle of April. After the 51 political teachers, all of them passed the examination. Among them, 15 were excellent, 20 were good, and 16 passed. Among them, Xiao Yu and Xiao Chen both graduated with excellent results. On the night of graduation, a banquet was held in the Yang manor. However, everyone's mood was a little low. This was because they all knew that after graduation, they would not have the chance to see the sixth young master at such a close distance in the future. Feeling everyone's sadness, Yang Chendong raised his wine glass and said with a smile, "Tomorrow, I'll go to the Black Dock with everyone. At that time, you'll see the exciting first appointment ceremony. But that's great. Everyone immediately became happy. Everyone still did not understand what an appointment ceremony was, but to be able to go back to the Black Dock with the sixth young master and have more opportunities to interact with him was, of course, what everyone wanted. That night, many children got drunk, especially Xiaoyu, who drank a lot. She fell asleep in Yang Chendong's arms with a red face. In this regard, Yang Chendong did not have the slightest intention of blaming them. It was rare that he did not call for an emergency meeting at night. He knew that the 3 months of training were very difficult for these children. Their nerves were especially tense. Now that they had finally graduated, it was time for them to relax. Nothing happened that night. The next morning, everyone thought that they had set foot on the road back to the Black Dock with a new spirit. At the Black Dock, various factories had begun to be built one after another. Although they were facing a situation where they could be moved at any time, the factories were a bit simple and crude. However, this did not prevent them from creating their own path of innovation. Not only were the factories making great progress, the Navy's development was equally gratifying. Under the joint efforts of Gao Xiong and Leng Song, they had fought several naval battles in the past 3 months. Relying on their advanced weapons, strict military discipline, and excellent military training, they had won one battle after another. The Navy's fleet had also been greatly expanded. It was no longer like before when they only had 2 or 3 ships. Now, apart from the treasure ship, which was no longer being built in the Ming Dynasty, they had 1 second-class horse ship, 4 third-class grain ships, 10 fourth-class ships, and 20 fifth-class warships. When Yang Chendong brought 51 teachers to the Black Dock, the first thing he saw was this scene. Looking at so many warships by the port, the 6th young master's mood was very excited and surging. In 2 years, the Navy finally had a scale. It was the kind of scale that did not attract attention. With this, they already had the ability to dominate a corner of the sea. In other words, if there was any danger, Yang Chendong had a safe place to retreat to. Overjoyed, Yang Chendong generously took out a series of new cannons. For example, the largest second-class ship was equipped with a Type 87-82 mm mortar. It can accurately hit anything within a 5-7 km radius. It was also equipped with a Type 75-105 mm recoilless cannon. It had a range of 7-4 km. The other third-class grain ships, fourth-class ships, and fifth-class warships were also equipped with various types of cannons. The range was between 1.5 km and 5 km. The accuracy and range of modern cannons was far from what the civilization and technology of that time could compare to. It could be said that with these, in addition to the brave soldiers, there was no naval fleet that could not be defeated. With these, Yang Chendong finally issued his first order. That was to expand outward, preparing to take down Xichen City, Tainan City, and Ryukyu Island. At the same time, they would dominate this part of the Ryukyu Sea. Any ships that passed through here would either pay a heavy tax and become friends, or be destroyed and sunk. Finally, they were prepared to take down Xichen City and the entire Ryukyu Island. Gao Xiong, Leng Song, and the others were very excited. Gao Xiong was in charge of the naval battle and the landing on the sea. After that, the land battle of Xichen City would be led by Leng Song. This was not a drill, nor was it a small skirmish. It was a real conquest of the island. The scouts had already investigated thoroughly. There were 30,000 to 40,000 people living in Choken Castle, and the entire Ryukyu Island had more than 200,000 soldiers and soldiers. If they were to occupy that place, it was easy to imagine how huge the base would become. Chapter 35. Yang Chendong expressed his understanding of the general's excitement. He also made a request, which was that they could not conquer the entire Ryukyu Island in one go. Instead, they should first take down Xichen City and use it as a stronghold to slowly expand to the entire island. This was to slowly assimilate them and make them submit. Yang Chendong naturally had his own plans for making such a decision. In the end, Ryukyu was still a vassal state of the Ming dynasty and belonged to the category of non-conquering states. What Dabai meant was that Ryukyu regarded the Ming dynasty as their leader and would pay tribute every few years. As a condition, if someone attacked them and threatened them, the Ming dynasty had the obligation to send troops to help them. Yang Chendong did not want to become enemies with the powerful Ming dynasty, so he naturally would not do such a thing. More importantly, in order to develop in the future, he needed a large number of people. While he could not steal people from the Ming dynasty, he could only use the natives of Ryukyu Island. Every life here was precious. Unless it was absolutely necessary, he could not casually kill them. After all, a country was based on people. Without a large population, it would be extremely difficult to do anything. Yang Chendong wanted to peacefully take over Ryukyu Island. To this end, he made 3 decisions. First, in order to not spread the news, the attack on Chiken City would be carried out in the name of pirates. This way, even if someone leaked the news, it would not be related to him for the time being. Second, he strengthened his control over this area of the sea. He only allowed people to enter and not leave Ryukyu Island. Anyone who left the island would be strictly checked. If there were suspicions, he would be detained. In short, he would not allow anyone to spread the news of Ryukyu being attacked. Third, when attacking Ryukyu Island, he could use both civil and military forces. That was, he could use military force to intimidate. For example, when attacking Chiken City, he could use cannons and modern firearms. He had to take down the city with lightning speed and intimidate the people. Afterward, the political instructors began to work, focusing on persuasion and persuasion. In addition, various factories were built one by one. He greatly promoted irrigation, built cement horse tracks, and created prosperous businesses. This allowed everyone to have things to do, food to eat, and money to earn. When a person had enough to eat and drink, they would get used to this kind of peaceful life. Their thoughts of rebellion would fade a lot, and it would be easier to manage. As for the issue of feeding everyone, Yang Chendong had already made relevant arrangements. He took out a lot of potatoes from the big warehouse and prepared to plant them on Ryukyu Island. At that time, the crop yield was extremely low, no more than 2 dan. 1 dan is equivalent to about 188 caddies today. Potatoes, however, could yield as low as 15 dan and as high as 20 or 30 dan. With this item, it would not be difficult for the commoners to fill their stomachs. Everyone had their own problems, and it was easy to solve the problem at work. The roads on Ryukyu Island needed to be repaired, and new cement houses needed to be built. All of these required a lot of men. Moreover, he would need a lot of manpower to build a glass factory and a granary in the future. As for women, they could work in garment factories. Those who were cultured could become teachers. They could also learn new songs and join the propaganda team. They could also enter the hospital after learning new songs. It didn't matter if they served the army or the people. As for those who were uncultured and unable to learn, they could become cleaners and maintain the hygiene and cleanliness of the entire island. They could even become the female militia and contribute to the protection of the island. Yang Chendong even had arrangements for the children. They could study in school while joining the children's regiment. They could also be on guard duty or undergo military training. At that time, if someone wanted to inquire about information, they would be caught by the female militia and the children's regiment before the security bureau could get the news. This was planning for a rainy day. While many people were still excited about attacking Kaiken Castle and occupying Ryukyu Island, Yang Chendong was one step ahead of them and came up with sufficient solutions for the problems that would occur in the future. Of course, the reason why Yang Chendong was so cautious was because there were too many Han people on Ryukyu Island. They were his own compatriots, and he absolutely could not kill them casually. Of course, the more Han people could live, the better. On the other hand, if it was the Japanese Empire, he was afraid that he could only sweep through and kill those who did not comply to prevent future troubles. After formulating all kinds of attacks and solutions, and even arranging the specific people in charge one by one, the conferring ceremony officially began. 1447, 11th year of Zhengtong, 28th day of the 4th month. On this day, the wind was gentle and the sun was bright, the sky clear. The beach in front of the Black Dock was crowded with people. All the soldiers and civilians of the Black Dock were present. From the elderly over 60 years old to the babies who were only 1 or 2 months old, they were all mobilized here. The population reached nearly 10,000. This was specially emphasized by Yang Chendong. The conferring ceremony was solemn and formal, so it naturally needed to be watched by all. Right now, there were still very few people under him, so he had to mobilize all of them. When the next conferring ceremony came, there was no need to mobilize the elderly and children. Even the common people under the semi-military management stood in an orderly manner. No one made any disturbances. Other than a few babies crying out because they were hungry, there was no other sound. At 9 o'clock in the morning, Yang Chendong, who was dressed in military uniform, was the first to walk up to the temporary cement award platform. He walked to a standing microphone that he had obtained from the warehouse. It was connected to 4 huge loudspeakers, enough to ensure that his every word would be transmitted to everyone's ears. Yang Chendong, dressed in martial attire, was wearing the marshal's uniform. A souvenir from the warehouse was found. The marshal's epaulette was golden yellow with red edges. It was 14 centimeters long and 5.8 centimeters wide. There was an additional circle of silver-white pine branches around the epaulette. The 2 national emblems on the epaulette were made of pure gold. The star emblem and pine branches were embroidered with silver thread. The layer of golden yellow on the epaulette was made of pure copper wire and then gilded. The cap emblem, star emblem, and symbols of the marshal's uniform were also made of pure copper. The golden areas were gilded with gold, and the silver-white areas were gilded with silver. The chest area of the marshal's uniform was embroidered with golden ribbons and tassels. The cuffs and collar were embroidered with golden embroidery. The edges of the pants were embroidered with golden and bright red stripes. They were all embroidered with pure gold thread. Wearing the blue military uniform, Yang Chendong's figure was even more tall and straight. Paired with the shiny leather shoes and the majestic cap, it instantly gave people the feeling that they had to look up to him. Yang Chendong, wearing white gloves, first solemnly raised his right hand and saluted in a very standard military salute. Then, he decisively put it down and looked at the people below the stage. He said in an excited voice, "Today, all of us will be here to witness the arrival of a sacred moment, and that is the military's conferring ceremony. The military's duty is to protect the country. Their existence is to protect everyone's lives and property. In order to complete this mission, they have to sacrifice their youth and even their lives. Therefore, being a soldier is glorious and sacred. The military cares about the family and forgets about the family. They can't be blasphemed. However, since ancient times, no country in history has ever had a military holiday. This is unfair and unjust. I, Yang Chendong, hereby announce that in order to show my respect and gratitude to the military, August 1st of every year will be Army Day. This is a military holiday, a holiday unique to them. That day belongs to them. Glory and glory will only bloom for them. Long live the 6th young master. Long live the 6th young master. It was the first time that the status of a soldier had been raised to such an extent. For a moment, the excited soldiers below the stage began to shout loudly. They shouted with all their might to express their feelings of being soldiers who would die for their friends. In the crowd, Xiao Yu was also tearing up when she heard Yang Chendong's words. Seeing that everyone's morale was so high, she was excited. She suddenly had a bright idea and sang loudly, "The east is red, the sun rises. The country has produced a Yang Chendong, he is the people." As soon as Xiao Yu started singing, her voice immediately became louder. The other 50 teachers who knew this song sang loudly at the top of their lungs at this moment to express their feelings. As for the other soldiers, they could only stare with their eyes wide open. They couldn't get a word in. After all, they hadn't learned this song yet. But even so, the singing of 51 people, no. It should be 54 people. There were also Qiao Yin, Beta Persei, and Yang Si from Jianing Prefecture. 54 voices shouted loudly. It was not a small momentum. They smoothly finished singing the first time. The general idea of the lyrics was also heard by the other soldiers. He Yang, Song Deshang, and the other 5 teachers felt the meaning of this song. They made up their minds to find Xiao Yu and the others immediately after the ceremony. They must learn this new song first. After Dongfang Honga finished singing, the scene quieted down again. Yang Chendong's eyes were bright. He said in a loud voice, "Next, we invite the conferring personnel to come to the stage. The ceremony officially begins." As soon as he finished speaking, the sound of orderly footsteps could be heard on the stage. Tiger's Mane took the lead, followed by Gao Xiong, Leng Song, Yu Guang, Ting Shan, and Xiaofeng. They were all dressed in uniform. Among them, Tiger's Mane, Leng Song, Ting Shan, and Xiaofeng were dressed in pine branch green. They looked more calm and dignified. Gao Xiong and Yu Guang were dressed in white navy uniforms. They looked so dazzling and radiant. 6 sets of uniform were neatly worn on their bodies. They looked so neat and straight. Coupled with the large caps with the badges of the 88, they looked even more spirited and elegant. On their feet were black leather shoes that no one had ever seen before. A pair of white and clean gloves made them look very capable and imposing. As soon as this outfit came out, many young ladies and young wives in the audience widened their eyes. Some of the bolder ones were already blushing. They didn't even know where to put their hands. Chapter 36. At this moment, Tiger's Mane and the other 5 were also very excited. Especially Xiaofeng. He was not famous and was only an old member of Lengfeng. However, because of his outstanding performance, especially during the recent naval battle, he cooperated with Yu Guang to take over the largest horse ship. He was the first to board the ship by diving and controlled more than 200 people on the ship with a Type 81 rifle. He was recorded as a great merit after the battle. This time, Yang Chendong directly included him in the first batch of 6 officers for the conferment ceremony. Tiger's Mane and the other 5 walked excitedly in front of Yang Chendong, who was wearing the commander's uniform. Then, a gorgeous long military rank appeared on the empty epaulets. Just now, everyone felt that Tiger's Mane and the other 5 were lacking something. When the military ranks, collar flowers, and the Type 81 insignia were put on one by one, their spirits were lifted. They gave off a feeling of perfection and impeccable. Among the 6, Tiger's Mane was given the rank of captain, which was also the highest among the 6. Gao Xiong and Leng Song were given the rank of first lieutenant, while the other 4 were given the rank of second lieutenant. These were the 6 officers under Yang Chendong. After being conferred their ranks, the 6 of them uniformly saluted Yang Chendong and at the same time declared their loyalty to the 6th young master and the people. Then, a large number of soldiers who had passed Ling Feng's training walked up the stage. There were a total of 320 people, including He Yang, Song Deshang, and the other 4 instructors. This time, the 5 of them were not selected as officers. This was a lesson that Yang Chendong wanted to teach them. This kind of punishment was not excessive for underestimating the importance of cultural studies. However, it was too late for the 5 of them to regret it. If they had known this would happen, they would not have underestimated the importance of cultural studies. However, it was too late to say anything now. They could only perform well and hope that they would be included in the next conferment ceremony. 320 people walked up the stage. They had already changed into civilian clothes. Although it was a soldier's uniform, it still gave people a refreshing feeling. If it weren't for the example of Tiger's Mane and the other 5 officers, their appearance would definitely have attracted waves of screams. Even so, there were still many young men and women below the stage who looked envious. The 6th young master had said that not only men could become soldiers, but women could as well. There were even some special military branches that only women could do better. As for the other 2,000 auxiliary soldiers, they were also the reserve soldiers. When they saw the 320 soldiers standing neatly on the stage, they were all looking forward to the day when they would be recognized and pass the test. How cool would it be to finally get a set of such clothes? Presumably, when that day came, they wouldn't have to worry about finding a wife anymore. There were 320 people, some in white navy uniforms, and some in green army uniforms. One by one, they walked up to Yang Chendong and were given a cauliflower, a cap badge, and a private first-class epaulet. This was a symbol of identity and status. In addition, everyone also received a training uniform under the Type 07 uniform, a pair of combat boots, a beret, and a belt. The army mainly wore camouflage uniforms, while the navy had a white upper body and dark lower body. As for their weapons, they received a Type 95 assault rifle, a 3-shuttle bayonet, a combat shovel, and a number of grenades and other items. These 320 people passed the physical fitness, military literacy, and cultural tests. Their scores reached the level of elite veterans in the future, and the only thing they lacked was combat. Once they finished 100 battles, they would inevitably become an invincible army. The 320 people were also assigned to the army and navy as the backbone of their existence. In the future, depending on their performance, it wouldn't be long before there would be a lot of officers. But the next time, Yang Chendong might not be able to personally award them one by one. From beginning to end, the award ceremony was carried out under thunderous applause. Every time a soldier's epaulet was crowned with the rank of private first class, it would attract fierce applause from below. These people seemed to see themselves tomorrow. This applause was not only support and envy, but also encouragement and self-awakening. This conferring ceremony greatly elevated the status of the soldiers, increasing their sense of honor and belonging. Facts also proved that after the ceremony, more and more people signed up to join the army, and even some old people and women asked to sign up. Later, it was Yang Chendong who personally expressed his stance that the matter calmed down. He promised that every industry was a contribution, not only soldiers. As long as they made an outstanding contribution, the effect would be the same. Next, he would prepare enough medals to reward those who made outstanding contributions. And the medals were not limited to soldiers, workers, farmers, even teachers and businessmen, and even members of the children's regiment. As long as they had outstanding performance, they could also receive medals. Medals were also divided into grades, which meant that glory could also be exchanged for money. In other words, it was a symbol of status, but it could also be used to supplement the family. Of course, in the future, if someone received a medal, whether or not they would use it to make money was another matter. Unless they couldn't live anymore, no one would do that. After the award ceremony, Yang Chendong stayed at the illegal docks for 5 days. He looked at the progress of some factories, gave some valuable suggestions, and listened to Gao Xiong and Lung Song's plan to jointly attack Crimson Castle and occupy the entire Ryukyu Island. After that, he got up and left. There was no other way. With Yang Chendong's current status, it was very difficult for him to stay at the illegal docks for too long. If someone went to Yang Village and couldn't find him, then there would be an unknown problem. Before he had enough strength, Yang Chendong still had to be careful. After bidding farewell to Lung Song, Gao Xiong and the others, as well as the sobbing Xiaoyu and the others, he finally got into the carriage and returned to Jianing Manor after he repeatedly promised that if Xiaoyu performed a meritorious deed, he would personally confer the title to her. In the carriage, Qiao Yin considerately placed a thick cushion behind Yang Chendong to make it more comfortable for him to lean on. After watching Qiao Yin carefully do all this, she lowered her head and didn't say anything. Yang Chendong could tell that she had something on her mind. He smiled and moved his head closer. "What's wrong? Is there something you're unhappy about?" "Nothing." Qiao Yin is envious of the young master's elegance. When she praised someone, her tone was so powerless. Yang Chendong was even more certain of his judgment. His expression also became more serious. "Yin, you must have something on your mind. Tell young master." "Of course, if you don't say anything, then you're not of one mind with the young master. I'll find someone to marry you off." Yang Chendong, who cared a lot about Qiao Yin, used a threatening tone as he spoke. If he really had to marry Qiao Yin off, he was afraid that he would be the first one to miss. Qiao Yin also cared a lot about Yang Chendong. When she heard this, she was frightened. Her face immediately fell and she looked like she was about to cry. "Young master, Qiao Yin has something on her mind. I'm worried about you, young master. You mustn't marry Yin off." As she spoke, Xiao Yin threw herself into Yang Chendong's embrace. Her tears flowed down uncontrollably. Previously, when she saw Yang Chendong doing something, Xiao Yin was happy but also worried. After seeing the appointment ceremony this time, she had a better understanding of the young master's strength. This inevitably made her worry even greater. The Ming dynasty didn't allow for the raising of private soldiers. Even princes with the same surname weren't allowed to have them. What kind of person was Yang Chendong? He was just a young scholar. Of course, now that he was a 9th-ranked official, if news of the illegal docks were to spread, then he would definitely be beheaded. It wouldn't even be excessive to implicate the 3 families. In Xiao Yin's heart, the young master was so knowledgeable and so capable. Now that he was an official, if he continued to develop, then his future would be limitless. At the very least, he wouldn't have a problem with having enough food and clothing. So why did he have to do something similar to rebellion? She was a bit afraid and even panicked because of her fear. She was worried about what would happen to the young master if news of the illegal docks were to spread one day. When that time came, what should she do? Holding the crying Xiao Yin in his arms, Yang Chendong stretched out his right hand and gently patted her back. His expression was a bit more peaceful. He knew what Xiao Yin was worried about and knew even more clearly what he was doing. Perhaps it was as others thought. He could let go. With the resources and ability in his hands, being a safe young master wasn't a problem at all. But could he really do that? He would marry in the future, have children, and have descendants. Perhaps he would be able to live peacefully in his lifetime. But what about his children? What about his children and grandchildren? Once the Ming dynasty fell and the Tatars entered the pass, they could all become slaves. This was definitely not what Yang Chendong wanted. When he thought of that, his heart would ache. This was the main reason why he wanted to establish his own power. As the saying goes, it's better to rely on yourself than on others. Rather than hoping for the younger generation to work hard, it was better to do something himself. At the very least, he would create better conditions for them. Even if there was danger, under the powerful protection and umbrella he established, he would have more time and opportunities to avoid disaster. Of course, Yang Chendong had a bottom line when doing things. That was, he wouldn't take the initiative to make a move against the Han people. Because they were his own people, he would unite as many as he could and help as many as he could. Unless they killed themselves, he wouldn't make a move against them. Secondly, it would depend on the attitude of the imperial court towards him. If he could use his thoughts to influence the emperor and make him make some reforms that would benefit the people and govern the Ming dynasty well, his power would only be on the sea and not on the mainland. It was still the same sentence. Yang Chendong had always admired the backbone of the Ming dynasty. He also admired the emperor's behavior of guarding the country. At the very least, the emperors of other dynasties couldn't compare to him in this aspect. But what if he couldn't influence them? Then he could only play by ear. Since Yang Chendong was blessed by the heavens to come to the great Ming dynasty and brought so many good things, if he didn't do anything, wouldn't he be betraying the heavens? At least, that was what he thought. Chapter 37. He did have some ideas, but it wasn't the time to tell her everything. Even in front of Xiao Yin, he couldn't tell her everything. Could he tell Xiao Yin that the great Ming dynasty would be destroyed in less than 200 years and would be ruled by the descendants of the Jurchens? At that time, would all the Han people be left behind and become slaves of the Manchurian Qing? Even if he was willing to tell her, even if Xiao Yin worshipped him, she probably wouldn't believe him. Since that was the case, there was no point in saying more. It was better to follow his own ideas. Yin, I know what you're worried about. But look, isn't the young master fine now? Moreover, I've already made them prepare to leave the illegal docks. Once they find a new place to live, there won't be any leaks. Young master, I will be safe. Young master, do you know what Yin is worried about? I only thought of this method to take them in because I pitied them. In fact, Yin also saw that the people at the illegal docks, regardless of gender or age, which one of them isn't living happily. Presumably, this kind of life is something they didn't even dare to think about before. And I, young master, have helped them realize it. Isn't this also a great merit? There's no need to think so much. In a person's life, danger is everywhere. If you're not careful, you'll be hit by a rock or struck by lightning. Sometimes, you'll even choke to death while drinking water. Life is short. It's like a fleeting cloud. Since we're lucky enough to come to this world, of course, we have to do as much as we can to do what we like. That way, we won't live in vain. Don't you think so? Also, young master can promise Ian that as long as we're not in danger, these people will only move around at sea and won't appear beside us. What do you think? While persuading her, Yang Chendong gently stroked Xiao Yin's back, down to her hair, and finally cupped her cheeks and looked at her seriously. Really? Will they affect the young master if they're just out at sea? Originally, Xiao Yin was only worried about Yang Chendong. She was afraid that her actions would be known by others and that the imperial court would punish the young master. If that happened, it would be equivalent to her being ruined. If that happened, there would be no meaning in her life. More importantly, Xiao Yin believed that since she was the young master's personal maidservant, she had to stand up and warn him when she saw that something was dangerous. This was her duty and responsibility. Now that Yang Chendong said that there was no intention of rebellion, and that as long as there was no danger, those people would only stay at sea, they immediately became happy. Of course. When has the young master ever lied to Yin? Yang Chendong saw that Xiao Yin had been persuaded and his mood improved. He reached out his hand and tapped Xiao Yin's nose. Only then did Xiao Yin realize that she was so close to the young master. Her face immediately turned red, and when she felt a light scratch on the bridge of her nose, she threw him a coquettish look and said, "Young master is naughty." At this moment, Xiao Yin was so charming. In addition to her good looks, she had been eating well and sleeping well for the past 2 years. Her body had already become plump. All of this caused Yang Chendong's heart to sway. Even his body began to react. Cough. In order to avoid awkwardness, he felt that his body was only 17 years old. It was still too early for him to do certain things. He should wait a little longer. Otherwise, it would be detrimental to his health. Thus, he forcefully suppressed the excitement in his heart and tilted his head. With a sleepy expression, he said, "That the young master is tired. He wants to sleep for a while." Xiao Yin had already noticed Yang Chendong's tall tent. She was already 18 years old, so she had already heard about it from her mother in the Yang family's old residence. Her face immediately turned red. Her heart was filled with joy because this proved her charm. However, she still said with concern, "Young master, if you're tired, then go to sleep. When it's time to eat, I'll have the tiger's mane stop and call you." At this moment, Yang Chendong felt very uncomfortable. He had actually lost his composure in front of Xiao Yin. After all, he had lived 2 lives. His mental age was already 40 years old. This really shouldn't be happening. He didn't know how to deal with the awkwardness in front of him. He simply tilted his head and went to sleep for a while. June, 1447. Duke Ing Zhangfu's farmland was seized. Eunuch Xining tried to seize Duke Ing Zhangfu's farmland, but Zhangfu refused. Xining's brother Xixing led his dying slaves to beat up Zhangfu's wife, causing her to become pregnant and die. Zhangfu complained to Ingzong, but Ingzong refused to help Xining's brother. Afterwards, Xining instructed the Qin county magistrate to falsely accuse Zhangfu of seizing 20 hectares of farmland. In June, Zhangfu was ordered to return the farmland to the people. Zhangfu could only obey. He was an old official of 4 dynasties and a meritorious official in the Battle of Jing'an. He led the army south to conquer Annan, destroyed the Hu dynasty, and achieved countless military merits in 3 expeditions to the north. However, in his later years, he still couldn't avoid being bullied. Even a random eunuch could give him a hard time. Even if he complained, he wouldn't receive the emperor's favor. This represented the immense power of the eunuchs. Many old officials were bitterly disappointed. However, in order to not be implicated, no one dared to stand out and say a few words of justice. When the news spread and reached Yang Chendong's ears, he couldn't help but sigh. From this matter, he seemed to have seen his own future. Once he entered the capital and became an official, he would have to deal with eunuchs. At that time, how could he let them have their way? If he really offended them, who knew if the same thing would happen to him? If that was the case, wouldn't he have to swallow his pride like Duke Ing? He had made so many contributions and was an old minister of several dynasties. In terms of qualifications and experience, he could be considered qualified. However, he was still unable to escape the fate of being bullied. This was tantamount to sounding the alarm bell for Yang Chendong. It made him firmly believe that maintaining a sufficient armed force was extremely important. A month later, good news came from the Black Pier. After careful planning, Gao Xiong and Lung Song had worked together, and 7 days ago, they had successfully taken Crimson City and taken control of the situation there. The messenger had also sent a few plans and blueprints for the construction of Crimson City. Once the 6th young master agreed, they could begin to implement them. Holding the map of Crimson City, Yang Chendong did not sleep for the entire night. He spent half the morning perfecting the map and marking the locations of the factories. After that, he wrote a letter to Gao Xiong and Lung Song, congratulating them on their victory. At the same time, he reminded them not to be arrogant. They had to follow their previous plan and slowly expand their territory and influence through assimilation. At the same time, they had to seal off Ryukyu Island so that only people could enter and not leave. They couldn't allow any news of what had happened there to be leaked, especially to the Great Ming. For the sake of safety, Yang Chendong's method of communicating with others was always in the form of a secret letter, which was written with sugar water. Sugar water was a carbohydrate, an organic substance. When written on paper, it was colorless, but when burned, the organic substance would carbonize and turn black. In reality, all organic substances would turn black when burned. This technique sounded very simple, but no one knew about it at the time. It was guaranteed that even if the letter fell, no one would know what was written on it. With Crimson City taken, the Black Pier began to move. Most of the factories, civilians, and barracks there would be demolished, leaving behind only a few small houses for daily communication. This way, even if someone discovered that place, it wouldn't be a big problem. Yang Chendong could finally have a good night's sleep. Ever since the Black Pier had been established, Yang Chendong had been very cautious. Gao Xiong had said more than once that the Black Pier was in a very remote location and was destined to be very difficult to discover. But its existence meant that there was a chance of it being discovered. This was inevitable. As a result, he hadn't had a single day of proper rest. Now that the Black Pier had moved, the stone hanging from his heart could finally be put down. This also meant that his plans for the seaside had officially come to an end. What came next was to prepare for the capital. For this matter, Yang Chendong called the old butler Yang Hai over. He had to trouble him to make a trip to the capital and find a good place on the outskirts of the capital. It had to be at least 1,000 mu to 2,000 mu. He wanted to build a young family manor in the north. There were 2 reasons for this. Firstly, he wanted to plant potatoes. This was a high-yield crop that no one knew about, so naturally he had to experiment with it first. In truth, there wasn't much to experiment with. Yang Chendong was only doing this to give others a visual impact, so as to obtain a better reputation for himself, and perhaps even a better official position. Secondly, and most importantly, he needed a relatively safe place. He didn't want to live in the capital. If any danger were to occur, he wouldn't have enough time to react, and there wouldn't be enough time. But if he were to live outside the capital, he would have more protection. With the name of potatoes, no one would be able to criticize him. In short, Yang Chendong had always been on guard. He would definitely not be like Zhang Fu, who would let others bully him without retaliating. People said that even a rabbit would bite when cornered. As for whether Yang Chendong would bite someone or not, it would depend on how anxious he was and how much he was forced to do so. Bringing the potato seeds and some farmers of the Yang family manor, butler Yang Hai began his journey to the north. This time, he would stay there until the 6th young master went to the capital. Then, he would hand over the position of butler to his son, Yang Neng, and return to the old house in Jianing Mansion to enjoy the rest of his life. This was also approved by Yang Chendong. This time, Yang Hai also brought his son, Yang Neng, to teach him what a good butler should do. Everything seemed to be going very smoothly, and Yang Chendong was only waiting for the coming year. Once the mourning period was over, he would enter the capital and pay his respects to the prosperity of the capital. But just as he was about to do so, an unexpected guest suddenly appeared outside his old estate. Chapter 38. Yang Chendong, who was writing the Chu Liuxiang series of stories, Legend of the New Moon, suddenly saw Tiger's mane rushing over from the corner of his eye. Beside him, Xiao Yin was still grinding ink as if she hadn't heard him. Yang Chendong coughed lightly. The young master is feeling a little thirsty. Oh, Xiao Yin will bring some tea for young master. Xiao Yin apologized and left. Tiger's mane flashed into the study and said with a hint of anxiety in his voice, "Young master, someone saw a dozen strangers in the city. They have embroidered spring blades on them and 3 of them are heading towards our old mansion." People from the embroidered uniform guard? Yang Chendong frowned when he heard the name embroidered spring blades. He couldn't figure out what these people were doing here. Did they discover something? That shouldn't be the case. It had been some time since the people from the illegal docks moved away. If they were here to cause trouble, they wouldn't have come at this time. Moreover, there were only 3 of them. Wasn't that looking down on them too much? Although the embroidered uniform guard and East Rock didn't need any reason to capture people and were very domineering, it didn't seem right to say that there were only 3 of them out on official business. In that instant, Yang Chendong thought of many questions in his mind. Then he determined that the 3 of them weren't here to capture people. Perhaps there was something else. "Young master? What should we do?" Tiger's mane looked nervous. According to his plan, he would directly control the 3 of them so that they wouldn't be able to enter the old mansion. Then he would find a safe place to ask them and everything would be clear. If they really discovered something and wanted to capture people, then they would directly go to Crimson City and stay there. It should be incomparably safe with the sea between them. Let's wait and see first. After Yang Chendong determined that they weren't here to capture people, he decided to wait and see. Then he thought of something and reminded Tiger's mane, "Don't make a move without my orders, understand?" "Yes, young master." Seeing how resolute Yang Chendong was, Tiger's mane didn't dare to make a decision on his own, so he agreed and left. At this moment, Xiao Yin walked in with a cup of hot tea. Her timing was impeccable. Outside the Yang clan's old mansion, 3 men dressed in casual clothes but carrying embroidered spring blades slowly walked past the Yang's gate. "You feel that someone is watching us?" The young master's man's eyes mane's eyes, T's mane's mane. Although this person was a little older, in his early 40s, it still couldn't hide the heroic spirit on his face. It could be imagined that when he was young, he must have been a handsome young master. "I don't see anyone following us." One of them looked around and shook his head. "That's right, boss. This is a private visit, and we never revealed our identities. This isn't the capital, and no one in this tiny Jianing prefecture would be able to recognize us," the other man confidently replied. "Is that so? In that case, I must have been mistaken." The mane's mane shook his head and looked around. When he didn't find anyone suspicious on the street, he relaxed. "How about this, we'll leave through the back door. Like you said, we're not here for official business, so let's not go through the front door. We'll scare people." The 3 of them paused on the street for a short while before taking a detour to the back door of the Yang's mansion. Normally, unless something major had happened, only the side door and the back door would be open. The side door was for visitors and people of status to enter and leave, while the back door was for the servants to move about. The Yang's mansion was no exception. Because it was almost lunchtime, there were quite a few people going in and out, saving the 3 of them the trouble of knocking on the door. They stepped through the door as soon as they arrived. This was Yang Chendong's intention. His actions were known by very few people in the Yang's mansion. He wanted to take the opportunity to let others know that he was an honest young master and did not have any bad intentions. The 3 of them walked into the backyard without being stopped. It was only when they entered the inner courtyard that someone came over to question them. Seeing that someone finally came over to question them, one of the lackeys couldn't help but say, "The management of the Yang's mansion is too lax. We're already here, but someone came over to ask about our identities. If we had any bad intentions, wouldn't we be able to easily take the sixth young master's life?" That's right. I heard that this person was very powerful, especially when it came to writing martial arts stories. Now that I think about it, he's probably just an armchair strategist. The other lackey also had a look of support and agreement. When the middle-aged man heard the discussion of the two lackeys, he didn't say anything to stop it. This was because he had the same opinion. At this moment, the thought of being spied on had completely disappeared. It must have been an illusion. The person who walked up was a steward of the backyard. He was usually in charge of 4 or 5 Yang servants. It was because of this identity that he couldn't help but curiously greet the strangers when he saw that there were no Yang's people leading the way. "The 3 of you? Who are you? Who are you looking for? How did you get here?" Being stopped, the middle-aged man didn't panic at all. On the contrary, he was very calm and said confidently, "We're looking for the 6th young master. We're his old friends." Old friends? Looking at the middle-aged man's age, the steward of the backyard didn't believe it. Who was the 6th young master? How old was he? How could he have friends of this age? Moreover, these people were his friends. It didn't make sense for them to come to the backyard instead of paying a visit to the front door. "Hee, I don't think you're the young master's old friends. You're here to ask the young master to tell you a story, right?" The steward of the backyard thought that he had guessed correctly. With a dark smile, he wanted to shout and summon people to chase these 3 people out. Ever since the rise of Yang Bao, there were many people who wanted to see the 6th young master. However, because the young master rarely received guests, he used the excuse that it wasn't appropriate for him to receive guests at home. This caused some people to have crooked thoughts. There really were all kinds of people. The 3 people in front of him were probably people who wanted to fish in troubled waters from the backyard. The steward thought that he had seen through the clues. He opened his mouth and was about to shout when a pair of large hands flashed over and covered his mouth. "Let me tell you, if you don't want to cause trouble, don't shout." The person who made the move was the middle-aged man. As he spoke, he took out an ivory belt. It was the special identification of the embroidered uniform guards. There were all kinds of rumors about the embroidered uniform guards and the East Factory. They really took orders from the emperor and had unimaginable power. They didn't need any evidence to arrest people. Sometimes they even relied on their mood. In particular, the ivory belt they used made people's expressions change. It went without saying what it represented. Now that it appeared in front of him, the steward's legs went soft and he was about to kneel on the ground. The middle-aged man used a bit of strength and lifted him up. Then he said in a low and threatening voice, "Which courtyard is the 6th young master in?" "The north courtyard. The one in the north." Feeling the strength of the hand, as if it could break his neck at any time, the steward of the backyard answered with a pale face, "Lead the way." The middle-aged man casually pushed the steward to the back. A subordinate took the steward. The group of 4 then walked towards the courtyard where Yang Chendong was. All of this was seen by Yang Lu in the dark. However, because the young master had already instructed not to touch these people, he could only watch. However, the steward of the backyard who went soft was remembered. After this incident, this person would definitely not be able to stay in the Yang family's old residence. He actually dared to betray the 6th young master. Just based on this person would never be employed by the Yang family. Even with the personality of Tiger's Mane and the other servants, it was hard to say if they could survive after leaving the Yang family. With someone leading the way, the 4 of them quickly arrived at the courtyard. However, this place was very quiet. It didn't look like someone lived here at all. At the same time, the middle-aged man also felt a faint murderous aura nearby, as if it could open its mouth and swallow him at any time. What is this place? Why is it so quiet? The middle-aged man's eyes were bright and full of expression as he looked around. However, he couldn't find any traces of other people. If it weren't for the fact that he carried out all sorts of missions all year round, he probably wouldn't even be able to feel a trace of murderous aura. After knowing that the other party was an embroidered uniform guard, the steward of the backyard didn't have a shred of integrity. He thought that the young master had committed a crime and was about to be captured. He thought that the Yang family was finished. Thus, he didn't hide anything and pointed to a room about 20 steps away. That is the study room of the sixth young master. Because the young master likes peace and quiet, servants like us are not allowed to come here. Seeing that the person in front of him had betrayed his master, the embroidered uniform guard who was holding him snorted angrily and casually threw him to the ground. The other person took large strides forward. From the looks of it, he wanted to scout ahead and see which room the sixth young master was in. Isn't it a pleasure to have friends from afar? However, this doesn't seem to be the way of a guest, does it? Could it be that you want to show off in front of this young master? A slightly immature but confident voice rang out. Following that, a young man in a green robe walked out of the study room, followed by a beautiful maid. He held a folding fan made of ivory in his hand, appearing rather graceful. The people who had appeared were naturally Yang Chendong and Xiao Yin. With Yang Chendong's keen senses, he naturally heard the approaching footsteps and knew that someone had arrived at the courtyard. However, he didn't immediately walk out. Instead, he pointed outside the window for Xiao Yin to see. Yin, some troubles will appear even if we don't want to. You will slowly understand this young master's intentions. You're tuning in to the Wang Lin's Journey YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.